It all starts in the virtual reality game with the largest player population in the world, called Zero Fantasy Online. Popularly known simply as ZFO, we see a huge demon-faced monster staring down a warrior. This level 998 player was about to become the first person in the world to reach the game's max level. With frantic clicks of his mouse, the boy tries to keep up the pace so he doesn't miss his chance. Sweating profusely and wearing his VR headset, the young man mutters that this is impossible. We see the boy in front of his computer screen in a completely dark room, focused on the game. With wide eyes, he thinks that 200 straight hours without a break is overkill and plans to eat and sleep as soon as this is over. Sitting there in his chair, he reveals that he just wanted to accomplish something in his life. Remembering how frustrated he used to get while studying, he confesses that he wanted to master a single thing to have his name engraved in history. He also tried sports, where he could only ever get third place on the podium, disappointing himself. Completely frustrated and looking down, he laments that he was never number one in anything. At that, the boy clenches his fist tightly, showing his determination to change that fate. Back on the game screen, the knight watches the defeated monster as the young man thinks that in ZFO, things would be different. The giant monster begins to disintegrate in a great explosion of light. The game's knight maintains his imposing posture, prepared for what's to come, leaping to deliver the final blow. He believes he could become the first in the world to achieve this feat. However, reality hits him hard as the boy's body gives out, and he coughs up blood in front of the computer. Breathing heavily with a lost look in his eyes, he asks himself what the heck is happening, not wanting to believe the situation. As the monster roars on the screen, the young man curses, realizing his vision is getting completely blurry. With his vision turning red and his strength fading, he laments being so close to his great goal. The screen cruelly displays a "You have perished" message as his body lies, slumped over the computer desk. Foaming at the mouth, he realizes his game was over right when the final level up was before his very eyes. Suddenly, his vision opens to a blue sky with clouds as he lets out a groan of pain, not understanding anything. Our main character, now standing in the middle of a forest wearing peasant clothes, looks around, asking where he is. Startled, he hears a desperate scream in the background, begging for someone to stop the attack. Looking at the scene, he sees green goblins armed with axes mercilessly attacking local villagers. Another monster leaps menacingly toward the innocent victims, ready to strike. As the villagers run in desperation, telling the creatures to get away, the boy observes everything, noticing something familiar on the ground. A farmer raises his pickaxe, trying to defend himself from one of the goblins that is charging fiercely toward him. Easily dodged, the man is left vulnerable as our hero finally recognizes them as the goblins from the game ZFO. Before the creature, the system reveals it is a level 7 fire goblin, ready for battle. The poor, terrified farmer trembles in fear, being only a level 1 with no chance to fight back. Looking at his own hand, the young man realizes he can feel his body perfectly in this strange place. Clenching his fist with conviction, he finally understands that he has been reincarnated into the world of his favorite game, and begins to devise a plan of action. Focused, he speaks the command to open the holographic system status window. The panel appears, showing the name Alan at level 1 with an undefined class, which he thinks is a reasonable enough name for his new life. However, his expression darkens as he remembers he was about to reach the max level and is now back to square one, failing once again to reach the top. His thoughts are interrupted by the villagers who scream, calling out to him as if he were a saviorous adventurer. A bald old man panics, begging the young man to hurry and save them all from this massacre. Analyzing the situation, Alan concludes that they are non-playable characters, and the fact that they recognize him as an adventurer means the rules apply here. Recalling the main story of the game, he figures this world must also follow the plot where adventurers fight against the Demon King's army. Keeping his cool, the protagonist tells them to wait a second, as he's going to set his class in this very moment of tension. The old man despairs, shouting that at level 1, he's no different from the villagers, and that it would be impossible to defeat the monster in such a suicidal way. Agreeing with the man, the boy admits that he really can't beat the creature at a basic level and wonders what he should do to turn the tables. Focused on the system options, he ponders that the level 7 enemy would be a lot of trouble for a normal class, but he already has a trick up his sleeve. Directly on the screen, he selects the artisan class, remembering that it's a strange profession focused only on creating harmless items. With wide eyes, he recalls that in the original game, this class was considered the worst possible trap for a player to fall into. However, now that the story's setting has become reality, he knows exactly what to do with his current knowledge from the modern world. Pressing the confirmation button, the boy bets that he will be able to use this profession's specific feature to his ultimate advantage. The system announces the class change as our protagonist creates a magic sphere in his hand, ready to test his skills in the field. Concentrating his energy, Alan activates the creation ability, causing blocks of light to appear around his open palm. The digital particles begin to gather quickly, shaping the structure of a complex object made of blue light. With a newly created heavy weapon in his hands, the system displays the assault rifle's data, confirming its attack power of 30, 5 and 30 rounds of ammunition. With a smirk, he celebrates his success, realizing that the rule of creating things if you understand their structure applies perfectly to his knowledge from his past life. Recalling the sleepless nights studying hard, he finds it ironic that his effort to be the greatest mind in the world would finally be of great use. Thinking out loud, he guarantees that he understands the structure of even a military fighter jet, should he need to summon one. The villagers are shocked, not recognizing the firearm, and despair upon discovering he chose the useless artisan class right in the face of certain doom. Racking the rifle's bolt, the young man chuckles, noticing that the profession's bad reputation remains exactly the same in this fantasy world. Placing his finger on the trigger, he prepares to show them that they are all very mistaken about his potential. Firing a lethal burst at the monsters, Alan demonstrates in practice the true destructive power of his modern knowledge. Keeping a steady aim, our hero unloads the bullets without hesitating for a single second, eliminating the danger. The brutal impact sends the goblin's head flying, with green goo spraying everywhere as the farmers watch the scene, jaws dropped. After lowering the weapon, smoke comes out of the barrel, showing the absolute lethality of the strange equipment. With the confident pose of someone who dominates the situation, the boy reflects that in a world stuck in the Middle Ages, he can bring as many modern war inventions as he wants. Displaying an intense and determined look, Alan affirms to himself that the artisan class is God, tear in his hands, without a shadow of a doubt. Completely in shock, the villagers can't believe that a level 1 newbie decimated a level 7 monster in the blink of an eye. Walking slowly toward him, the men break into a cold sweat, wondering what the heck just happened in front of them. Extending a hand glowing with green energy, the protagonist announces that now they themselves can exterminate the creatures with their own hands. Using his ability in mass, he materializes several perfect copies of the assault rifle, floating in the air. With the heavy weaponry falling into their hands, the farmers stutter, impressed by the weight and texture of the iron equipment. Overjoyed, they thank him for delivering these incredible weapons as Alan thinks with satisfaction that the advantage of his class is precisely manufacturing unlimited items for an army. However, one of the men in a blue bandana, sweating with worry, questions what would happen if they accidentally hit an ally in the middle of the widespread confusion. Resting the rifle on his shoulder in a cool manner, the young man reassures the group, revealing that he put a restriction on the weapons, so they only cause damage to the forest monsters. Wanting to prove he's telling the pure truth, he points the weapon directly at the villager with the bandana and fires without a hint of mercy. Terrified, thinking his life was over, the man cowers on the ground, protecting his head and desperately asking what the boy is doing. Startled, the man opens his eyes and realizes that nothing happened, while the protagonist reinforces that the equipment is completely safe. Furious about the previous massacre, the villagers unload the weapons on the goblins, screaming that this is payback for everything and telling them to drop dead. The precise shots tear through the creatures' green bodies, sending goo flying all over the forest. In silence, the boy analyzes the effectiveness of his creation in practice, observing the slaughter with tranquility. Just then, the system announces that he has leveled up to level 2, surprising the young man for advancing so quickly just by providing weapons to 2 people. The holographic screen explains that when a monster is defeated using a forged weapon, a portion of the experience points automatically returns to the creator. Greatly relieved, the bald old man returns the rifle and thanks him profoundly for saving everyone's lives, begging him to take the equipment back. With a curious look, the hero notices a glowing stone in the man's hand, recognizing the object as the fire goblin's magic stone. This ruby-red crystal seals the creature's power and serves as the main source of income for adventurers, who exchange the item for money at the guild. There, specialists extract the power contained in the material and convert it all into versatile energy for the population's daily use. Suddenly, a desperate scream echoes through the forest, startling everyone present. A giant goblin wearing heavy armor and holding a shield appears, chasing a terrified villager who is trying to save his own skin. With a grim expression, the protagonist quickly realizes that this creature is not a common monster, but a boss-class enemy. The system confirms his suspicion, showing that it is a goblin knight at level 13, possessing far superior strength to the previous opponents. Confident from their recent success, the 2 armed farmers tell the hero to leave the job to them, as they now possess invincible weapons. The relentless shots from the rifles collide violently against the giant monster's shield and armor. However, the armored creature cracks a macabre smile, revealing that the attacks don't even leave a scratch on its resistant hide. Shocked by the ineffectiveness of the weapons, the men retreat, realizing that their previous tactic has failed miserably. After analyzing the crisis, the young man concludes that the situation has gotten ugly, as at his current level, it would be very difficult to manufacture a weapon capable of taking down that wall. Without wasting time, the Green Knight charges forward with fury, ready to crush the intruders with its stone club. Terrified by the brutal charge, the farmers scream for the boy to run away immediately, or he'll end up getting taken out. Despite facing his demise, he stares at the ruby magic stone in his hand, remembering that the creation ability also works to fix broken items. As the enemy raises its heavy weapon for the final blow, our hero formulates a new combat theory. With an agile dodge of the attack that shatters the ground, he reasons that if he can create, he should also be able to consume objects as forging material. Excited by the idea, he decides to test the theory in practice, activating his ability and fusing the monster stone into the blue light. The digital particles quickly take the form of a heavy rocket launcher in his hands. The holographic panel confirms his success, displaying a massive attack power of 525 with only one shot available. As he rests the weapon on his shoulder, he understands that using the magic core as a base material grants a devastating special effect to the equipment. Focused on the target, the protagonist explains that he limited the ammo capacity to a single shot to maximize the explosive damage. Without hesitation, he presses the trigger, and a brilliant projectile cuts through the air at high speed, heading straight for the armored knight's chest. Surprised by the projectile's speed, the giant monster barely has time to react before the missile hits its guard. A colossal explosion engulfs the creature, raising a curtain of smoke and fire as the system announces 2 consecutive level ups. Satisfied with the damage, he checks his status, noting that he reached level 4 all at once thanks to that intense combat. In the middle of the smoking crater rests only the red magic stone, confirming that taking down a higher level boss alone yields quite an achievement. Completely dumbfounded, the villagers can't believe that an artisan's weapon defeated such a large monster with a single blow, as they were supposed to be extremely weak. Reflecting on the mechanics, the boy realizes that equipment made with crystals breaks after the energy runs out, requiring him to alternate between normal and magic creation depending on the battle. Curious about such skill, the villagers question if he belongs to some famous warrior clan to possess such an absurd power. With his gaze turned to the blue sky, the young man denies the rumor, stating casually that he's just a regular newbie in these lands. At that exact moment, under the sunlight, the legend of the one true artisan began to spread throughout that vast, unknown world. As the only being capable of going head to head with the forces of darkness, he would be the key to ending the long and bloody war against the Demon King's army. With a glowing cube of light in his hand, our hero prepares for future challenges, using all the technological knowledge from his past life. After collecting the reward from the scorched ground, he confirms that he has now perfectly understood the fundamental mechanics of his underestimated profession. To achieve his goals, he plans to use this valuable gem to level up as efficiently and quickly as possible. Despite his immense potential, the boy himself still has no idea how monstrous his ability to alter the balance of this world is. Determined to fix his past mistake, he swears that this time he will be the first warrior to reach the maximum level as he faces a gigantic stone golem in the middle of the mountains. Thanks to reaching level 13, the young man unloads his pistol at the enemy, revealing that he went to that inhospitable place just to test his new forging capabilities. Before the enormous creature, the panel indicates it's a level 20 stone golem, surprising the artisan who didn't expect to find such a colossal beast. In a quick switch to the assault rifle, he fires a continuous shower of bullets at the stony target. The violent impacts shatter the creature's surface layer, chipping off small pieces of its rigid body. However, the smoke soon dissipates, showing that the wounded rock quickly rebuilds itself, healing any damage suffered in the attack. Completely intact, the monster raises its massive arms and emits a threatening sound, demonstrating its unshakable vitality. Faced with this opponent's passive ability, the hero notes that besides its formidable defense, the creature also has continuous regeneration. With the gleaming rifle in hand, he laments that although he has maximized his raw firepower, purely physical attacks are not enough to overcome this barrier. Considering the situation perfect for a practical test, the boy smiles excitedly, deciding to try a new enhancement function on his equipment. Through his peculiar energy, he materializes a mechanical component with an empty space in the middle, glowing in a vibrant blue hue. This mysterious piece turns out to be a slot adapter designed specifically to modify the artisan's base weaponry. Quickly, the device fuses to the side of the assault rifle, creating an extra compartment ready to be filled with some powerful material. Through quick reasoning, he deduces that inserting an elemental gem into this new space will directly attach its magical properties to the common bullets. Visualizing the virtual holographic inventory, our protagonist plans to elevate his weapon's destructive power to a completely different level. With a simple hand movement, he accesses the digital storage, pulling the desired item into the real world. The orange crystal falls gently into his palm, being the magic stone from the golem he had saved during his journey. Without hesitation, he presses the raw stone directly into the rifle's compartment, forcing the gear to fit perfectly. Immediately, the magic core begins to pulse with intense energy, powering the entire structure of the firearm. With a focused and deadly look, the boy prepares to test the true capability of his new invention on the battlefield. The status window glows, confirming that the piercing effect has been successfully added, imbuing the ammunition with the power to completely ignore the target's physical defense. Satisfied with the genius of the mechanic, he celebrates the achievement, knowing that the penetrating ability is the mortal weakness of that rocky enemy. Oblivious to the imminent danger, the stone giant beats its own chest and roars fiercely, challenging the small human to a direct confrontation. With his sights firmly locked on the monster's chest, the artisan returns the provocation, wanting to see if the creature can take the hit this time. With a firm, merciless squeeze of the trigger, a burst of luminous projectiles tears through the air at high speed, heading towards the massive rock. The continuous impact of the piercing bullets goes through the golem's natural armor, shattering its entire body into hundreds of pieces of rubble. Attentive to the destruction with surgical precision, the hero ensures that the monster has no chance to regenerate its lost limbs. The creature's vital core cracks under the pressure of the relentless attack, decreeing the absolute end of that living wall. A thunderous explosion raises a cloud of dust and pebbles, turning the terrible enemy into mere gravel scattered on the sandy ground. During a slow walk through the dusty crater, the panel beeps, informing him that he has reached level 14 as he mutters that the practical test was an absolute success. While inspecting the smoking barrel of the rifle, the young man sighs in relief upon confirming that using the recreation ability only on the extra slot preserves the weapon's durability, preventing it from breaking after using magic. After another combat in the forest, the protagonist bends down to collect the reward left by the defeated monster, keeping his weapon firmly in hand. A system notification suddenly appears, displaying his advancement to level 15, surprising the boy with the speed of his progress. The holographic panel informs him that the peasants have repelled a horde of orcs, making the hero note that they are putting the forged weapons to good use. Over the past few days, he has traveled through several farming villages, distributing rifles to ensure the residents' safety and gain experience points completely passively. Satisfied with this brilliant strategy, he walks calmly, absolutely certain that choosing the artisan class was the best possible decision. Far away, at the majestic main headquarters of the Adventurers Guild, the mood among the top brass is one of pure shock. Gathered before a crystal ball, the evaluators are flabbergasted by the record of an adventurer who has been leveling up at an explosive rate in recent days. A man in glasses questions if there isn't some error in the system, finding it impossible for someone to jump from level 4 to 15 in just 4 days. Focusing on the projected screen, they read the name Alan at level 15, stating they have never heard of this individual before. One of the female evaluators points desperately to the artisan class, stressing that there is no way a trash profession could level up so fast. Intrigued by the mystery, the man in glasses decides to project the record of the boy's most recent battle directly onto the magic crystal for all to see. The holographic image displays the protagonist facing the gigantic stone golem, leaving everyone confused as to why he is using purely physical attacks. As they observe the assault rifle firing lights, the guild members wonder what kind of bizarre weaponry that is in the newbie's hands. One of the men, sweating bullets, comments that he has never seen anything like it, lamenting that the monster with absolute defense is being treated so humiliatingly. As the stone beast is shattered in the projection, they come to the conclusion that this firepower is on a completely different level from their known reality. Analyzing the damage, the experts calculate that his actual level might be 15, but his firepower is easily equivalent to a level 50 adventurer. This breaks all established rules, as weapons created by artisans should be considerably weaker than conventional ones. The evaluator confesses he doesn't understand the logic behind it all, admitting that this man is in a completely unique category. The group's leader, with a dark look, orders them to report this to the Grand Master, suspecting they have finally found the vessel they have been searching for. The serious conversation is interrupted when a subordinate points to the crystal globe, warning that the boy has just started a battle against another boss. Far from the guild, our hero comes face to face with a gigantic sandworm emerging from the ground, a level 27 boss. With a fixed gaze on the immense beast, he notes that this creature has an incredibly high amount of health, making it perfect for testing the limits of his creations. As the rocket launcher has the drawback of only one shot, the protagonist wonders how much he can increase the power of a compact weapon using add-ons. To carry out this practical experiment, he materializes the magic core of the stone golem he just obtained in the previous battle. Through his digital energy, the young man activates his forging ability, merging the raw gem with the weapon's structure. The system displays the result of the process, revealing a tactical pistol with an incredible attack power of 220. Facing the bluish equipment, he realizes that fusing the stone granted a massive bonus to the firearm's basic attributes. Intending to go even further, the boy fits an elemental ice magic crystal into the pistol's extra compartment. The holographic panel confirms the modification, showing that the weapon now has the special effect of freezing everything its bullets touch. With a confident smile, he ensures that everything went according to plan, because even if he doesn't take out the giant worm in a single shot, the freezing effect will guarantee his complete safety. The colossal monster charges furiously, opening its maw full of teeth as the hero aims the weapon, stating that there's no way to miss a target of that size. Maintaining a firm stance, he pulls the trigger, firing a burst of freezing energy towards the creature. The luminous projectiles make direct contact with the worm's skin, causing a thunderous impact on the battlefield. In a matter of milliseconds, the entire body of the desert beast is completely frozen from the inside out, leaving a huge hole where its mouth was. The protagonist slowly lowers the pistol, observing the cold mist that dissipates in the air around his masterpiece. The unbeatable monstrosity is now nothing more than a gigantic, harmless ice statue in the middle of the scorching sand. Small cracks begin to form on the crystallized structure of the defeated creature. Satisfied with the equipment's lethality, the young man puts the weapon away, noting that its power surpassed even his own expectations. Acknowledging the facts, he concludes that a simple modified pistol managed to instantly decimate a high level boss without needing the destructive fire of a rocket launcher. Walking calmly through the desert, he reinforces his initial thought that the artisan class is truly god tier. Amidst the frozen debris, he collects the worm's magic core, which glows with an intense reddish color. With his pockets full, the boy decides it's high time to go back to the city and exchange all those stones for money at the guild. Entering the bustling lobby of the adventurer's branch, he heads directly to the service counter to make the transaction. Dumping an absurd mountain of rare gems on the table, he leaves the receptionist speechless, and she asks for the client's name to process that unbelievable amount. With a serene expression, the boy simply replies that his name is Alan, awaiting payment. Upon hearing the adventurer's name, the girl's eyes widen, and she starts to sweat, realizing who he was. Visibly nervous, she stutters, asking him to wait just a moment, and runs to the back of the establishment. Alone at the counter, the hero is left clueless about that sudden and suspicious behavior. Suddenly, heavy metallic footsteps begin to echo through the hall, drawing the attention of everyone present. Feeling the atmosphere grow heavy, the protagonist glances out of the corner of his eye, wondering what the heck is going on. An entire squad of heavily armed elite guards surrounds the young man, blocking any escape route. The guard captain, wearing heavy armor, confirms the boy's identity, warning him that he is under strong suspicion by the organization. Maintaining his composure in the face of the threat, our protagonist simply asks what that knight is talking about. Without giving any explanation, the guards activate chains of magic light that instantly bind the artisan's arms and torso. The officer declares authoritatively that from that moment on, he is being escorted directly to the guild's main headquarters, drawing a sigh of frustration from the young man. Moments later, in the luxurious premises of the central headquarters, the chained boy is thrown into the middle of a huge meeting room. The guard leader snaps his fingers, and the energy restraints dissolve, allowing the prisoner to finally move. Sitting at the head of the table, a man with a goatee apologizes for the aggressive approach, revealing that he was very curious about the absurd speed at which the newbie was leveling up. With his hands crossed and a mysterious smile, the man in the suit states that he needed to talk to him anyway, no matter the cost. Rubbing his wrists, which were sore from the containment magic, the hero returns the courtesy, asking bluntly what these higher-ups want with him. A suited man with glasses slams the table, demanding that the boy reveal all the secret details of that strange weapon called a firearm. Maintaining an unshakable posture, the protagonist retorts that they wouldn't understand even if he explained, as it's a collection of technology that simply doesn't exist in this world. Bothered by the newbie's arrogance, another evaluator with a mocking smile comments that he talks big for a mere trash artisan. Trying to wound the young man's pride, the smug fellow implies that the so-called weapon must not be anything special for him to want to hide the secret. With a sharp gaze, our hero immediately realizes that the intention of that cheap insult is just to provoke him into spilling valuable information. Determined to shut the suits up, the boy raises his right hand, activating his forging ability and generating a bluish light that illuminates the entire room. Materializing a mass-produced assault rifle, he throws the equipment on the table, telling the arrogant evaluator to examine the item as much as he wants. The system displays a base attack power of 50 as the young man informs them that he's gifting them the exact same weapon he provided to the old folks at the farm. Completely shocked, the members of the board realize that an attack power of 50 is equivalent to an elite knight and panic when they notice it can fire 30 times in a row. Turning his back to the table, the protagonist states that the conversation is over and walks towards the exit of the meeting room. Without looking back, he says his goodbyes, asking to be excused as his great goal is to be the first in the world to reach level 999, and he has no time to waste. At that exact moment, the man with the goatee stands up abruptly from his chair, slamming his hands on the table, and telling the boy to wait. With an extremely serious look, the suited man questions if this absurd ambition means that his final objective is to defeat the Demon King. Stopping in his tracks, the hero casually agrees, arguing that he heard from the farmers that the situation is terrible because of the Army of Darkness and he plans to help. Adjusting his glasses with a grim expression, the guild leader confirms the story, revealing that all of humanity is facing an unprecedented crisis at the hands of that brutal army. Through a projection of a destroyed city, The suited man reports that an entire metropolis recently fell to the enemy army, while the boy assures them he will solve these problems eventually. After standing up in a relaxed manner, our protagonist advises them to schedule an appointment the next time they want to talk. As he walks towards the exit, escorted by the guards, he hears the leader ask him to wait, as there is one more pending matter. With a bored look, the young man questions over his shoulder what they want this time. Raising his index finger, the man with glasses suggests that if he wants to level up efficiently, he should join a clan. Focused on the proposal, the artisan wonders internally how this clan business would work. The evaluator explains that it is an organization formed by adventurers and already offers to introduce him to an A-rank group. At that moment, another suited man pushes his colleague aside, annoyed, telling him to stop trying to get ahead. To sway him to his side, the fellow argues that the faction he supports is also elite and focuses on high-level dungeons. With a wave to calm things down, the goateed leader interrupts the discussion, advising that the boy has the right to decide and offers a spot in his own parents' clan with preferential treatment. Scratching the back of his neck with little interest, Alan refuses all proposals, stating that he does not intend to join any guild at the moment. With a calm look, he justifies wanting to move freely, while the leader understands and asks to be notified if he changes his mind. Unceremoniously, the boy opens the large door and ends the conversation, bidding farewell to the top brass. In the silence of the room, the evaluators comment that he simply left, proving to be a very difficult person to deal with. Staring intently at the assault rifle left on the table, one of them wonders how that weapon works, certain that it's not something a level 15 artisan could manufacture. With a serious expression, the man with glasses proposes to summon the best artisans and blacksmiths in the country to analyze the equipment in detail. Changing scenes, we see the entrance of a huge rocky cave crowded with gathered adventurers. This is the famous Wolf Mine dungeon, with its portal shining in a mystical blue hue. During his calm walk through the place, the protagonist notes that even in this world, the entrances to instance dungeons are super busy. Approached by a stranger, he receives a friendly invitation to join a group that needs one more member. However, upon checking the hero's status, the man's eyes widen in astonishment that he is only level 15. Sweating profusely, the man turns his back on the spot and runs off, apologizing and telling him to forget the invitation. Faced with this rejection, the young man sighs in frustration, as adventurers think it's crazy for someone of a low level to try their luck in a place recommended for level 25. With a confident smile, he thinks that he would never have come to a weak area like this if it weren't for the level difference modifier. The system details that in this world, facing enemies 10 levels above your own applies a massive experience bonus, making it the fastest way to level up. In the middle of his walk, a sharp scream of despair catches the boy's attention. Looking to the side, he sees a group of thugs surrounding a blonde girl, telling her not to be so reluctant. The leader of the gang is the swordsman Lucas, level 65, who is harassing the priestess Emma, level 20, forcing her to join his team. From a distance, the other adventurers whisper that the guy is forcing another woman to accompany him. But no one has the courage to intervene because of his strength. Licking his lips in a disgusting way, the swordsman intimidates everyone in the place, as his reputation for attacking innocents without hesitation wards off any hero trying to play the savior. Cowering in fear, the priestess begs to be left alone, justifying that she just wants to play with people of her own level without being carried on someone's back. Spreading his arms, the bully leader tries to seduce her, saying that leveling up easily like this is an irresistible offer. With a sadistic smile alongside his henchman, he implies that the experience will also be very good for them, in a completely harassing tone. Suddenly, a bluish light appears on the ground right in the middle of the thug's circle, catching everyone's attention. The energy condenses, forming a solid, shining bronze structure that sprouts from the earth. Realizing the imminent threat, the swordsman's eyes widen in complete shock. A gigantic statue of a hand giving the middle finger hits the bully squarely, making him fall hard to the ground while his cronies panic. Ignoring the frightened girl, the protagonist walks calmly, apologizing and claiming that this spell is very difficult to control. With his usual bored face, he boldly states that his forge just accidentally failed. Lying on the ground, trembling with anger, the gang leader stutters, not believing the excuse of a magical failure. Acting like a madman, the brute grabs the boy's shirt, threatening to take him out and asking if he has any idea who he's messing with. Pulling the priestess behind him, the hero tells the guy to calm down, explaining that he just wanted to test his long-distance forging, but ended up slipping right where an idiot was standing. Seething with hatred, the swordsman frowns, not accepting being humiliated like that in front of everyone. With a colossal sword in hand, he points the weapon at the newbie, telling him to stop talking nonsense, because he doesn't believe this story about slipping. However, upon facing the opponent up close, the bully analyzes the floating status and notes with wonder that the insolent brat is only at level 15. Thinking he is facing a harmless insect, the brute bursts into laughter with his henchman, mocking the boy's courage to pick a fight while being so weak. With the sword on his shoulder, the bully backs down, stating that he would become a joke if he took out such trash, ensuring that he will make an exception and let him live. Without wasting time, the protagonist turns his back and leaves, taking the girl with him while ironically thanking him for his mercy. Side by side, the relieved priestess thanks him for being saved, believing her fate would have been terrible without his help, but the young man confesses that his intention was not to play the hero. Bothered by being ignored, the swordsman shouts from a distance, warning that the conversation was not over yet. With a dark expression, the villain makes it clear that he promised not to take him out, but that doesn't mean he would get away with that affront. Glancing out of the corner of his eye, the artisan questions what the thug's proposal would be to solve the problem. Pointing towards the luminous portal, the guy suggests settling their differences through a friendly competition. Excited, the brute shouts, proposing a race to see who can clear the dungeon faster. Faced with the absurd proposal, the young man understands that it will be a race against time against a level 65 guy, betting that if he loses, his face will be disfigured from all the beatings. Worried about the injustice, the blonde girl tries to argue that this is totally unfair due to the huge difference in strength between the two. Amidst a murderous aura and a sick smile, the bully licks his fingers, suggesting that she offer herself as a prize if he is victorious. Trembling with dread, the priestess sweats, fearing the worst. Breaking the tense atmosphere, our protagonist calmly accepts the challenge, leaving the girl in shock while he thinks about what he will ask for in return. With his eyes closed and an ironic smile, he decides to let it go, saying that he doesn't care about receiving any reward from that trash. Convinced of his absolute superiority, the swordsman scoffs, justifying that there isn't even a 1 in a million chance of the newbie winning this dispute. With his hand in his hair, the boy interrupts the cheap speech, revealing his real intentions. Under a threatening gaze, the hero scoffs, saying that even if he won against a small fry like him, the reward wouldn't be worth much anyway. After hearing the insult, the brute grinds his teeth, feeling the veins on his forehead pop with pure anger. Trembling with fury, the bully snarls that he understood perfectly that the artisan is just an arrogant idiot who doesn't know his place. Back at the wolf mine portal, everyone prepares to start the dangerous clash. With her staff held firmly, the blonde girl tries to warn the protagonist that it is very risky for him to enter a place recommended for level 25 while being so weak. Ignoring the danger, the boy says it's no problem at all, as his goal from the beginning was to hunt and level up inside that cave. Already positioned at the entrance with his gang, the swordsman questions mockingly if the loser plans to challenge the place playing alone. Full of himself, the villain suggests he recruit some members, as the place is full of losers who would form the perfect team for him. Without losing his cool, the young man retorts the provocation, feigning surprise that a level 65 tough guy needs a pos to clear the dungeon. His pride wounded, the thug grinds his teeth, almost attacking the boy right there. With his back to the enemy, our protagonist tells him to do whatever he wants, as he doesn't give a darn if the coward travels in a pack. Behind the hero, the priestess asks him to wait, assuring him that she will accompany him on this suicide mission to pay her debt. In the first steps towards the portal's light, the system opens a holographic window confirming the group invitation, formalizing the unexpected partnership. Before the luminous screen, the protagonist stares at the system notification in total silence, assessing the situation. Without a second thought, he rejects the group request and coldly informs her that he doesn't need help from that newbie. Completely astonished by his attitude, the girl hesitates and stutters, asking him to wait just one more second. Clinging to the young man's arm, the priestess is dragged across the floor towards the dungeon while she begs to accompany him on the dangerous mission. With a determined look, she takes the blame for all the previous confusion and sends a new invitation, guaranteeing that she won't let him go in there alone. Glancing at his partner out of the corner of his eye, the artisan reflects internally on how incredibly stubborn this woman can be. Worn out, he lets out a sigh and finally agrees to the idea of forming a temporary duo. Directly on the floating holographic panel, the boy presses the green button and formalizes the formation of the unusual team. Greatly relieved, the blonde opens a radiant smile and thanks him from the bottom of her heart for the opportunity to pay her debt to him. From a distance, the swordsman raises his voice, telling the newbie to manage in there but demanding that he not let the healer perish under any circumstances. Surrounded by his henchmen, the thug displays a repulsive expression and confesses that his gang plans to have a lot of fun with the girl after their inevitable victory. In response to this absurd filth, our hero just maintains his serious posture near the glowing portal while the girl trembles in terror. Upon touching the stone entrance of the magic cave, a sharp warning sound immediately catches the duo's attention. The system registers at the door that the absolute clear record for that location in history is exactly 19 minutes and 12 seconds. With a relaxed pose, the boy smiles confidently, absolutely certain that breaking this unreachable mark will be the easiest thing in the world with his inventions. Without wasting any more time on the bet, the duo passes through the bluish portal, officially starting the dreaded challenge against the clock. The scenery soon changes to a long tunnel with reddish lighting, completely infested with frightening creatures blocking the passage. The system analysis reveals the presence of evil bats, disgusting centipedes, and undead warriors all above level 20. Faced with this gigantic horde, the girl breaks into a cold sweat, fearing that it will be impossible for just 2 people to clear a path to the final boss room. Totally relaxed about the imminent danger, the artisan reassures his ally, guaranteeing that despite the numerical disadvantage, those creatures are nothing more than a bunch of useless trash. To optimize the combat, he instructs the healer to store her wooden staff in her magic inventory, as that equipment would only hinder their tactic. From the materialization of a glowing data cube, the young man warns that since she forced her way onto the team, she'll have to work for it and fight too. The dark cave is immediately illuminated by blue lightning as the protagonist activates his creation ability at maximum power. The magical flash dissipates, and the priestess's eyes widen as she finds herself holding 2 submachine guns, each with 135 attack points. Greatly astonished, she questions what kind of absurd weaponry that is with such an insane status, while the boy reinforces that it's a firearm exclusive to his class. Holding an identical pair of tactical weapons in his own hands, he prepares to teach the basics of modern combat to the native of this fantasy world. Aiming directly at the zombies' faces, he explains that its operation is extremely simple and requires no magical knowledge. With a focused and deadly look, the hero completes the instruction, telling her to simply aim at the cluster of monsters and pull the trigger. The deafening noise of the shots rips through the tunnel's silence, destroying the undead's flesh with a relentless rain of lead bullets. Fascinated by the lethality of the newly forged toy, the blonde praises the damage and soon receives the order from her impatient partner to start shooting as well. With no motor control whatsoever, the girl desperately pulls the triggers, firing blind bursts of energy to all corners of the hallway chaotically. The aggressive kickback of the weapons throws the blonde's arms up, making her whole body tremble as she cries for help, unable to let go of her hands. In a fearless advance, the protagonist reveals that he zeroed out the submachine gun's stability on purpose, because firing uncontrollably will hit anything in the middle of that crowded horde. With his eyes focused on the darkness, he ends the explanation and orders his partner to run full speed straight to the final room of the area. At the same time, in an identical instance of the cave, the arrogant swordsman's group advances, slicing through the weaker enemies in their path with some ease. After working up quite a sweat, the group of toughs puts away their weapons, breathing a sigh of relief for having cleared the entire first section of monsters in the mine. One of the henchmen in a red beanie comments, jokingly, that their leader can be an extremely malicious person in some situations. Pleased with his subordinate's cleverness, the villain listens to the explanation that the dungeon has a hidden mechanic of summoning an impossible extra boss if the player is new to the location. Finding the dirty plan hilarious, the brute lets out a sinister laugh, confirming that he used this knowledge just to send his adversary straight to the slaughterhouse without getting his hands dirty. During their walk, the gang agrees that the level 15 trash won't even get past the first room, proving he was foolish to accept the challenge. They mock the boy, betting that even by a miracle, the duo of failures will end up as beast fodder before reaching the main prize. With a look of pure cruelty, the leader regrets not being able to take the brat's head off personally, but is satisfied knowing he will suffer horribly in the brutal dungeon. Back to our protagonists, they finally reach a huge double stone door that seals the entrance to the deepest chamber of the dungeon. Observing the system's digital timer floating in the air, the priestess is shocked to find that the unbridled slaughter lasted less than 9 minutes. In a very sarcastic way, the young man points out that the bet's time would be even shorter if the clumsy newbie hadn't run off like a madwoman, stepping on the fire traps. A quick flashback shows the poor girl emerging from a cloud of smoke, all scorched after a misstep, justifying her partner's little scolding about the lost time. Very embarrassed, the healer asks him to take it easy, as it's her first time in an advanced place, receiving a dry compliment from the squad leader in return. Focused on his own system data, the hero notes with wonder that he jumped from level 15 straight to 18 in just a few minutes of shooting. Beside him, the girl sighs with happiness for having gone up a measly level, but the artisan concludes that the passive gain from his weapons, scattered around the world, yields much more experience. Noticing her friend's slowness, the blonde jumps with anxiety, telling him to stop daydreaming and focus on the imminent battle so they don't lose the bet through carelessness. Back to reality, the protagonist wields his heavy military armament, agreeing to end this nonsense as quickly as possible so they can get out of there. The heavy solid stone gate groans as it slowly opens, revealing a wide chamber bathed in a dark, magical, and totally oppressive energy. Just by looking into the darkness at the back of the mysterious room, the priestess's eyes widen, completely losing the courage to take a step forward. From the cold shadows of the room emerge 2 colossal, bestial silhouettes with murderous instincts, awaiting the arrival of the brave intruders. The dungeon's panel identifies the first creature as the majestic werewolf queen at level 25, displaying her white fur and imposing posture. Right beside her, the monstrous black, furred werewolf king appears at the same level range, causing immediate panic in the girl due to the double presence. Always calm, the young man casually mentions the hidden rule of the exclusive boss for beginners, and ends up getting a scolding from the blonde for hiding this terrible detail. Paying no heed to the silly human discussion, the beastly couple howls, showing their sharp teeth, and launches a synchronized attack on the inexperienced duo. With the monsters flying at full speed, the boy firmly raises his submachine guns while his ally covers her ears, thinking she's about to be sliced up. Through logical reasoning in a fraction of a second, the hero deduces that shooting now is useless, as the werewolves' absurd evasion makes the precision tactic flowed from the start. Faced with the overwhelming onslaught, the protagonist shouts a new order, telling the healer to fire continuously, just to create defensive suppressive fire. With her eyes closed, the girl obeys the command and screams at the top of her lungs, unloading the magazines of both weapons in a shower of golden flashes. Thanks to their aerial predatory instincts, the werewolf royalty moves in a furious zigzag, dodging the bullet barrier with annoying ease. Completely terrified, the blonde stutters that the plan is flawed because the boss's speed prevents any projectile from leaving the slightest scratch on them. With an analytical expression, the artisan studies the adversary's movement, noting that the beast's tactical separation has greatly complicated the battle scenario. Without hesitation, the hero runs to the opposite side of the room and tells the girl to hold off the queen's attacks while he destroys the king, ignoring her cries that this is suicide. Because of the gap in the formation, the white, furred wolf charges like a lightning bolt, ignoring the crossfire and focusing on devouring the more vulnerable opponent first. Sweating from desperation, the healer knows that her clumsy aim will never stop its approach and just accepts that her end will be to become monster chow. The lupine majesty's shining claws cut through the air, ready to tear the scared newbie's fragile body into 1,000 pieces on the dungeon floor. A millisecond from the lethal blow, the boy's swift silhouette cuts across the beast's vision, placing himself exactly in the middle of the attack's murderous trajectory. Behind the terrified partner's scream of terror, the protagonist's face lights up with a devilish and fully calculated smile in the gloom of the place. Instead of tearing flesh, the beast's frontal impact collides violently against an unexpected barrier, drawing a loud howl of pain from the queen. Enveloped in blocks of bright blue energy, the genius of modern creations internally celebrates the success of the bait, having predicted the ambush with absolute precision. Stunned by the hard hit against the invisible wall, the wolf limps back, disoriented, while the priestess remains huddled on the floor, fearing she could perish at any moment. With his body floating in pure power, the Master Forger pronounces the supreme command of his divine ability, already starting the assembly of the ultimate deadly trap. Advancing blindly, the werewolf queen steps right into the center of a luminous magic circle hidden on the floor. In the same instant, a bluish energy erupts from the trap, paralyzing the wild beast's body. Clenching his fist with conviction, the boy commands the target's imprisonment with his divine ability. A gigantic bear trap made of pure light closes violently on the monster's leg, spraying goo. Far away, the werewolf king watches the scene in shock, seeing his partner trapped, vulnerable, and falling to the ground. Surprised by the turnaround, the priestess's eyes widen, noticing that the speedy enemy has finally stopped moving. With a confident smile, the hero reminds her that he had already warned her, he just needed a little time to act. Amazed by the tactic, the blonde confesses she had no idea the artisan class could be used in such an ingenious way. Recalling the incident at the cave entrance, the protagonist thinks with relief that it was a great idea to have tested the long-distance forge on that group of bullies. While the black wolf remains stunned by his companion's fall, the young man walks slowly towards the trapped creature. With his pistol perfectly aimed, he decrees that an immobilized werewolf without its high evasion is nothing more than a common and harmless monster. Cornered, the black beast snarls furiously, showing all its hatred towards the small human. Under the dim light of the dungeon, the artisan stands mercilessly before the fallen royalty. With absolute coldness, he bids farewell to the exclusive boss, pulling the trigger without any hesitation. After exterminating the two beasts, the boy bends down with a sigh of relief and collects the valuable purplish magic stone left by the enemies. Hearing hurried footsteps, the young man calmly turns his head back, holstering his weapon. Running towards him, the healer celebrates having finished off the wounded queen, receiving a dry compliment from her partner. Immediately, the system panel appears, congratulating the duo on their completion in an incredible 9 minutes and 48 seconds, setting a new absolute record. Extremely excited, the blonde points to the historic time, but the boy soon bursts her bubble, announcing that the next day he will do the dungeon alone to have his name at the top. Isolated. Declaring the mission over, the hero walks towards the blue exit portal, followed closely by the girl. Outside the wolf cave, the priestess breathes a sigh of relief and thanks him immensely for all the help. When she tries to return the heavy weaponry, the protagonist kindly refuses, allowing her to keep the equipment for self-defense. Nearby, two adventurers watch the duo leave and comment confusedly that only 10 minutes have passed. questioning if they gave up halfway. Amused by the situation, one of the guys deduces that the newbie quietly slipped away while the bully's squad wasn't looking. Without changing his expression, the artisan faces the curious onlookers and informs them that no one ran away, as they just cleared the entire dungeon. The two burst out laughing, asking him to stop with those obvious lies, assuring him they won't snitch on his escape to the swordsman. Maintaining his composure, the young man just points to the stone pillar and suggests they check the record crystal to see the new mark. With bored faces, the men grumble that this joke about breaking the absolute record is not funny at all. They argue that the newbie doesn't even meet the area's recommended level, and judge it impossible for a trash class to perform such a feat. Mocking the situation, one of the adventurers confidently walks to the record pillar, stating that he will prove the farce on the spot. Upon glancing at the illuminated screen, the man's face completely loses its color in a deep and silent shock. The display flaunts the time of 9 minutes, followed by the names of Alan and Emma, confirming the surreal event. Trembling from head to toe, the guy falls sitting on the dirt ground while his friend questions how the heck that happened. With his hands glowing with intense blue energy, the protagonist decides to give a small hint on how he accomplished the feat. Numerous submachine guns materialize, floating around the shocked crowd, as he declares that those weapons are the definitive answer to the mystery. Holding the iron equipment, one of the adventurers panics upon checking the status and seeing an absurd attack power of 153. The man's eyes widen, and he screams in desperation that this level of damage is too high for any common equipment in their world. Very proud, the healer shows off her own submachine gun, stating with a smile that using the invention is the easiest thing ever. She naively explains that you just have to aim in the enemy's direction and pull the trigger non-stop. As she boasts, the guy's mental reality displays the image of her firing in panic, uncontrollably, leaving everyone terrified by the lethal demonstration. Staring at the boy as if he were a god of war, the adventurer asks, haunted, who this prodigy is after all. Without giving an explanation, the hero just turns his back, ignoring the man's insistent calls. Immediately, the crowd goes into an absolute frenzy, pushing each other to try to borrow those formidable weapons. Observing the widespread confusion, the artisan concludes that staying there is a pure waste of time and calls his partner to leave. As the duo moves away from the mess, on the horizon, a mysterious woman watches the young man from afar in the middle of the crowd. In silence, the warrior in red clothes turns her back on the chaotic scene and goes her own way alone. Her sharp and calculating gaze shows that she was extremely intrigued by the capabilities of that unknown forger. A few dozen minutes later, the dungeon portal glows again, and the bully swordsman emerges, arrogantly celebrating his group's victory. Cracking his neck, the brute boasts about almost breaking the 50-minute mark, absolutely certain that he won the bet. Settled near the entrance, the thug leader orders his henchmen to wait for the newbies to exit to apply the proper punishment. Laughing, one of the henchmen suggests that if the duo doesn't come out in an hour, they should leave, as they would surely be done for in there. Interrupting the celebration, the two curious adventurers from before cautiously approach the swordsman's group. With a serious expression, the man informs them that the challenge's opponents went home a long time ago. Seething with hatred, the bully questions, grinding his teeth, if the brats tucked their tails between their legs and ran from the bet. Soon after, he bursts into laughter, deducing that all that posing was just a cheap bluff to escape his doom. Shaking his head in denial, the informant shatters the villain's joy with a solemn attitude. Not understanding the tone of the conversation, the brute stops laughing, staring at the man with a face of pure confusion and anger. Straight to the point, the guy explains that the duo didn't run away but completed the dungeon in an incredibly shorter time than anyone else in history. Totally paralyzed, the gang leader is speechless, demanding that the man repeat that impossible absurdity. Refusing to believe the story, the swordsman marches furiously towards the stone pillar, cursing loudly. With a heavy stomp, the thug grabs the edge of the monument with brute force, trying to prove it was all a lie. However, upon laying his eyes on the digital panel, he lets out a confused murmur before the luminous scoreboard. With dilated pupils, he reads the 9-minute mark, not believing they lost so badly in a place that cost them almost a full hour of continuous effort. Noticing the boss's tension, the cronies approach cautiously, asking what went wrong with the pillar. Completely in shock and sweating bullets, the swordsman stammers that it must be a lie invented by the system, denying reality. Sooner or later, the reality hits him hard, and the brute collapses to his knees, screaming to the heavens that he doesn't accept losing like that. Far away, the scene changes to a dark and luxurious office where a mysterious man rests in the dark. Holding some papers in the dim light, the man analyzes recent reports with extreme, focused interest. The document displays the protagonist's photo and his war inventions, leading the leader to conclude that this forger possesses true strength. Interrupting the dense reading, knocks on the door echo through the closed room, and the man tells the visitor to enter. A muscular individual in assassin's attire, with silver hair and a mask covering his face, appears in the room, emanating immediate danger. With a cold gaze, The mercenary informs that he was summoned because he heard the leadership had a new service request. Displaying a malicious smile in the shadows, the suited man confirms the existence of the special mission without beating around the bush. Sliding the investigation report across the mahogany table, the boss points directly at Alan's image, marking the new target. Staring at the young artisan's photo, the assassin lets out a muffled chuckle, noting that this boy will make for a very fun job. A heavy bag of money is thrown onto the table, sealing a dirty deal with a generous payment. The client's finger taps firmly on our protagonist's photograph, marking the target. In the shadows, the masked assassin receives the direct and lethal order to exterminate the boy without a trace. Meanwhile, in the city, the priestess thanks him for everything, informing him that she will temporarily move her base to avoid reprisals from the swordsman's group. With a worried look, she questions if the hero really needs to leave like that, offering help to ward off the bullies if necessary. Maintaining a firm posture, the artisan refuses the offer, reminding her that she is also an adventurer and he can't depend on her protection all the time. Understanding his decision, the blonde accepts the facts, and the young man says goodbye calmly. Jumping with joy as she walks away, she demands that he not break any records in the dungeon without her, as she also wants to make her name in history. The system panel confirms the girl's departure from the group as she shouts from a distance, hoping they can team up again in the future. A few days after this encounter, we see the hero, now at level 24, walking through a rocky desert with the intention of testing a new invention. Upon activating his special ability, an immense amount of bluish energy forms, and he mentally hopes that the new project works perfectly. The light soon reveals the imposing silhouette of a modern war tank, confirming that the exterior replica was an absolute success. Satisfied with the combat machine's appearance, the boy quickly jumps to the top, wanting to check the internal controls. Opening the hatch and peeking into the dark interior, he gives a slight smile, noticing that the panel and seats were copied with impeccable precision. Seated in the driver's seat, the young man gives the command out loud, telling the armored vehicle to advance through the arid terrain. Under the scorching sun, the heavy vehicle remains completely motionless in the middle of nowhere, breaking the forger's expectation. With a drop of sweat running down his face, the protagonist quickly deduces that the machine would never work without some kind of fuel. The system of his abilities allows him to materialize any complex solid structure, but prohibits the creation of amorphous substances like water or gasoline. Far from being discouraged, the boy closes his eyes and smiles, revealing that he had already thought of an obvious countermeasure for this flaw in his class. Recalling the rules of his old virtual game, he analyzes in detail how energy works in this fantasy world. With a glowing greenish magic stone in his hand, he explains that these monster cores serve precisely as a universal energy source for society. In a swift movement, the hero fits the crystal directly into the tank's ignition panel, which begins to pulse with an intense glow. Quite focused, he bets all his chips on the theory that his modern inventions can also be powered by this raw magic. Immediately, the heavy engine roars, making the giant gears turn and kick up a lot of dust from the dry ground. The colossal war tank comes to life and begins to advance, tearing through the rocky terrain with its metal tracks. Excited by the machinery's vibration, the young man celebrates the success of the practical test, thinking he had solved the problem for good. However, a strange sound of failure echoes through the desert, and the armored vehicle abruptly stops its movement midway. Looking at the ignition panel, the artisan is startled to see the valuable green stone shatter into dozens of powerless pieces. Trembling with frustration, he grumbles in disbelief, as the machine consumed all the crystal's magical power in just a fraction of a second. Exiting through the top hatch with slumped shoulders, the boy sighs in disappointment, admitting that he still doesn't have enough resources to afford the consumption of such a gigantic vehicle. Staring at his unused masterpiece, the forger understands that he will need to hunt for very high-quality magic cores if he wants to move it, but is content with having proven his energy source theory. Leaving the heavy vehicle aside, he materializes his blue data cube, deciding to manufacture something much smaller and more economical this time. The magic light quickly dissipates, revealing a small, modern voice-activated reconnaissance drone floating in the air. Holding a tablet-shaped controller, the protagonist presses the activation button of the flying device. As the little machine gains height with the soft sound of its propellers, the boy watches its ascent, wondering how long this small invention will last. Through a direct vocal command, he orders the equipment to increase altitude and begin recording the entire desert perimeter. Satisfied with the flight stability, he nods positively, noting that the device has reached a perfectly acceptable blind spot for espionage. With the mind of a military genius, he already begins to plan improvements, thinking that if he attaches a firearm to the structure, it will become a formidable combat unit. Turning his attention to the luminous monitor in his hands, the young man decides to check the quality of the images being transmitted. Analyzing the display, the hero is surprised by the sharpness of the recording, which totally surpassed his initial expectations. Suddenly, his expression changes to pure seriousness, and he pauses the video on the spot upon noticing something very strange. The captured image clearly shows a group of individuals lurking among the rocks, making the boy wonder who those guys are, and if they are watching him. Under a dark and threatening gaze, he supposes they could be the swordsman's accomplices seeking revenge, but the bloodlust they emanate seems too intense for mere dungeon thugs. Bothered by the feeling of being hunted, the artisan summons his submachine gun and dashes towards the rocks, wanting to get to the bottom of this personally. From the top of the cliff, the band of masked assassins is startled to realize that their target has moved and is running exactly in their direction. Hiding behind the rocks, one of the mercenaries tries to remain calm, arguing that they are level 65 and their passive stealth abilities would never be detected by a newbie. Shattering any doubt, the protagonist stops midway and points directly at the rock, drawing the attention of the 5 cowards hidden there. Completely perplexed, the hired killer's eyes widen, realizing that their perfect camouflage has failed miserably. One of the subordinates asks the leader what they should do now, receiving the cold order to take out the target openly, since the silent approach was ruined. Maintaining his arrogance, the masked chief reflects that whatever that weird weapon in the boy's hand is, it's physically impossible for it to attack faster than them. Emerging from hiding, the leader walks confidently, remembering the rumors that this Forger's inventions have a magical restriction that prevents them from causing any damage to humans. Facing the armed boy, the mercenary scoffs, saying the job will be a piece of cake because he's only in the level 20 range, provoking a bored look from our hero. Despite his blind confidence, the platinum-haired killer warns his henchmen not to let their guard down, because if someone hired an assassination for a low-level guy, it's because he's hiding something dangerous. Tired of games, the artisan demands that everyone come out from behind the rocks, stating that he hates playing hide and seek in the middle of the desert. Slowly emerging from the shadows, the group's leader enters the boy's field of vision in a sarcastic tone, admitting that they were caught and are just a bunch of cowards. In a few seconds, the complete squad of 5 elite assassins lines up before the lone young man, forming a deadly barrier. Without showing a hint of fear, the hero gets straight to the point, questioning the purpose of this ambush in the middle of nowhere. Exuding a frightening murderous aura, the masked mercenary tells the brat to stop looking at them with that insolent gaze. At superhuman speed, the leader kicks up a cloud of dust and disappears from view, completing his sentence by saying they only came to dispose of his body. Squinting, our protagonist follows the absurd movement, realizing that the enemies simply vanished into thin air thanks to their class's extreme agility. Forming a deadly circle, the 5 brutes use their advanced stealth abilities to run in circles around the boy, becoming threatening blurs in the dust. Completely surrounded, the protagonist adjusts his combat stance and thinks with relief that it was an excellent idea to bring a rapid-fire weapon for this test. Appearing from a blind spot, the masked leader moves in for the final blow, calling the newbie a fool and guaranteeing that the weapon wouldn't even scratch him. However, the assassin's sadistic smile vanishes instantly when a burst of fire crosses his face, tearing the side of his head in milliseconds. Spinning his body on its axis, the master forger pulls the trigger without mercy, firing a storm of golden bullets in every possible direction. The deafening noise of the submachine gun echoes through the canyon as the projectiles pierce the mercenary's flesh in mid-air, sending goose spraying everywhere. Focused on the carnage, the young man keeps his finger glued to the trigger, tracking the target's movements with surgical and lethal precision. With no time to react, the rest of the elite squad is turned into a sieve by the relentless bursts, falling to the ground like bloodied sacks of potatoes. The dust finally settles, revealing a brutal scene where the 5 high-level killers lie scattered on the ground, defeated in a matter of seconds. Lowering the smoking barrel of the weapon, our hero sighs, saying they should have come up with a much better plan before running head on into a machine gun. Kneeling and coughing up blood, the gang leader questions in despair how this was possible, as the weapons weren't supposed to harm humans, making the boy understand their tactical blunder. Calmly, the artisan explains that he usually puts a safety lock on his inventions delivered to the villagers to avoid fatal accidents among civilians. Sliding his index finger along the side of the grip, the protagonist shows the small mechanical button that changes the tactical equipment's firing mode. Agonizing with bullet holes all over his body, the platinum-haired mercenary trembles in terror upon realizing how pathetic it was to fall for such a simple information trap. Staring at the dying trash with an empty, cold gaze, the young man decrees that the restriction on his personal weapon was obviously turned off, and that in the real world, whoever gets shot fatally perishes on the spot. Kneeling in the desert, the assassin's leader gulps, realizing he dug his own grave by underestimating the target's intelligence. With the barrel of the gun pressed directly against his sweaty forehead, the mercenary feels the cold metal announce his imminent end. Maintaining a cold expression, the protagonist demands to know why he was marked for elimination, threatening to shoot if there's no answer. Spitting blood, the masked brute gives a cynical smile, remembering that assassins take out anyone for money without asking questions. Unfazed, the young man insists on discovering the client's name, claiming not to remember doing anything serious to attract such extreme hatred. With his eyes fixed on the landscape, the boy mutters that the situation makes no sense, as he's sure he hasn't caused any trouble recently. Letting out a devilish chuckle, the assassin states that the problem isn't what the boy did, but the fact that he's too strong for a mere beginner. The mercenary reveals that there's a big shot in the world who doesn't like to see newbies breaking the rules and standing out like this. When the hero asks who he's talking about, the squad leader raises his head in a final act of rebellion, closing his eyes. Apologizing with an ironic smile, the killer declares that he's also a professional in the business and would never give up his client's name, letting out a final bloody gasp. Watching the body fall stiffly to the ground, the forger notes with shock that the man swallowed poison to ensure he wouldn't leak any valuable information under torture. Walking slowly away from the corpses, the young man reflects on the last words, wondering who would be so afraid of a humble level 24 artisan to the point of ordering his demise. Suddenly, the protagonist stops walking upon hearing soft footsteps on the sand, noticing that someone has been watching the slaughter the whole time. With the weapon still warm, he turns his head and asks dryly who's there, and if they have any connection to the band of dead mercenaries. The camera pans down, showing a pair of red female boots walking towards him as an arrogant voice replies that it would be a bad joke to be associated with that useless trash. A beautiful warrior with short blue hair and red combat clothes stops in front of him, stating that she is actually on his side. With a suspicious look, the hero doesn't buy the story easily, waiting for her to better explain this sudden claim. Without beating around the bush, the woman proposes that they form a team right there, guaranteeing that it will be a very advantageous deal for the young forger. Totally uninterested, the artisan rejects the proposal on the spot, warning that he doesn't need companions and, much less, wants to form a group now or in the future. In the woman's mind, the memory of the little blonde healer who was with him emerges, breaking the lone boy's argument and making her question the refusal. With her hands on her hips, the warrior huffs in irritation, telling him to stop being so prickly because she has something valuable to offer. Displaying a confident smile, she reveals that she has a good idea of who the mastermind was behind the squad of dead assassins on the ground. Immediately, the boy's bored expression transforms into fury, demanding to know the name of the scoundrel who tried to have him taken out. Instead of answering, the blue-haired woman points a finger in his face, wanting to first confirm if he really is the Alan who broke the speed record in the dungeon. With a grumpy face, the boy points to his own face, suggesting that she simply look at his status floating in the air to confirm his identity. Somewhat embarrassed, she looks away and apologizes, realizing her own obvious mistake of basic observation. The system explains that in the world of ZFO, players have the option to completely hide their status information from others by activating a simple setting in the menu. With a few quick movements on the holographic panel, the protagonist deactivates his profile's privacy, revealing his name to the curious woman. However, upon laying eyes on his level 24, the warrior's eyes widen in complete shock at the extremely low number. Ignoring her surprise, the boy crosses his arms and asks what the problem is, while she tries to hide her astonishment that he is much weaker than the rumors said. Thoughtfully, the girl in red admits that she couldn't analyze his level during the battle because she was observing from too far away and assumed he would be at least level 60 due to the damage done. Deciding to be fair, she announces that since he showed his information, she will also reveal her own status to level the playing field. The system flashes, revealing the name Melissa and the surprising class of glass sorceress at a formidable level 50. Without showing any reaction, the forger just nods at the introduction and immediately asks for the promise, impatiently questioning who paid for his head. The sorceress shakes her head, denying the free information, arguing that such valuable secrets don't come for free in this dangerous world. With narrowed eyes, the protagonist understands the game of interests and directly asks what she wants in exchange for the mastermind's name. Giving a victorious smile, Melissa opens her arms and proposes a fair trade where he helps her on a mission, and she gives him everything she knows about the ambush. Staring at the absurd level difference, the boy wonders internally how a newbie could be useful to such an advanced warrior. Pointing to the horizon, the sorceress reveals that the mission's target is an extremely famous and dangerous location nearby. A majestic view appears, displaying the Crystal Sky Castle, a colossal floating dungeon recommended only for adventurers above level 50. In a serious tone, she warns that this is no ordinary dungeon, being considered a challenge of maximum difficulty, even for the elite of her level range. The warrior details that the castle is a true hell, filled with aggressive monsters and gigantic bosses that appear completely randomly, preventing any prior preparation. Furthermore, the place is lined with cruel, deadly traps, enough to annihilate entire teams of veterans in the blink of an eye. As a final prize, she reveals that in the depths of the castle rests the fearsome crystal dragon, a legendary beast that is in a completely different league from the world's common bosses. After hearing the entire speech of extreme danger, the young man just arches an eyebrow, questioning why she would want his help in such a suicidal place. Manipulating a digital panel, Melissa displays the image of a green gem and reveals that her true objective is to obtain the Jade Dragon's orb, which only drops upon defeating the legendary beast. With a focused look, the artisan recognizes the material, knowing that the orb is a very high-level item on the world's resource table, surpassing all the stones he has ever seen. Crossing her arms, the glass sorceress questions with a challenging smile whether he will accept the deal or not, given so many dangers. Muttering to herself, she assumes it's impossible for a level 24 newbie to accept participating in such a suicidal mission, but thinks it wouldn't hurt to try her luck. Breaking all expectations, the boy raises his head and accepts the contract immediately, leaving Melissa completely flabbergasted and speechless. Gesturing frantically, she asks if he's crazy, or if he didn't hear anything she just explained about the insane difficulty of the dungeon in the sky. Very calm, the hero states that he heard everything she said perfectly, guaranteeing that he probably knows much more about the Crystal Castle than she does. Recalling his late nights in his past life, he thinks that he didn't want to get involved with this girl, but the fact is that he cleared that dungeon thousands of times in the game ZFO, knowing every millimeter of the place. Standing face to face, the young man declares that he doesn't mind taking on the heavy lifting as long as she fulfills her part of the deal and delivers the mastermind's head at the end. He reasons that if he doesn't quickly find out who wants him gone, new squads will just appear to hinder his experience gain, and he wants to resolve this as soon as possible. Turning his back, the artisan decrees that the deal is sealed and calls his new partner to march towards the flying castle. Trembling with anger and shame, Melissa mutters with her head down, drawing his attention to a small problem. With a bored look, the boy turns back, questioning why they can't just go to their destination. Sighing heavily, the sorceress points to the castle floating far away in the sky, explaining that there are two crucial reasons preventing them from entering the dungeon. She details that the only way to reach a castle in the sky is by undergoing a teleportation ritual performed exclusively by the government of the Dakian kingdom. Hearing the explanation, the hero remembers that in his old game, the teleportation worked just by talking to a specific non-playable character in the capital. Maintaining her composure, the blue-haired warrior warns with regret that unfortunately, the boy does not meet the minimum requirements to use the kingdom's magic circle. She points to a holographic graph showing that teleportation is restricted to adventurers above level 40. Bearing his entry as he is only at 24. Frustrated, the protagonist throws his head back and asks irritably why on earth she invited him on the mission if she already knew he couldn't enter because of his low level. With a blank face, Melissa confesses shamelessly that she didn't know his level before inviting him, justifying the mistake while he just asks what the second problem would be. Sighing dramatically, the sorceress argues that the second complication is the fact that they are only two people, which makes clearing the dungeon mathematically impossible. Through projections, the system details that an ideal group would need defensive warriors, a heavy frontline, support healers, and a brutal damage dealer to withstand the ambushes of the place. Speaking seriously, she confesses that her class focuses on area of effect magic damage, which is terrible for taking out single bosses with a lot of health, making the lack of a finisher a fatal weakness for the duo. Faced with this scenario, the Forger crosses his arms and suggests that the best alternative at the moment is to focus on hunting common monsters to level up quickly until they reach the level 40 mark. Upon hearing the proposal to focus on slow leveling, Melissa panics and confesses that this 3-month idea is terrible because she is in a great hurry to obtain the Jade Orb. Enveloped in an aura of burning determination, the boy ignores her rush and decrees with absolute conviction that his life's goal is to be the first person in the entire world to hit the maximum level. In a harsh tone, our protagonist warns that his time is too short and that he will not waste his days stumbling over trivial obstacles or ineffective shortcuts. With her hands on her hips, the sorceress agrees that having big dreams is nice but realistically reinforces that level 40 is an insurmountable barrier to using the kingdom's mandatory ritual. Thoughtfully, the young man mutters that clearing the castle is the easiest part of the mission and that depending on bureaucratic level-based transport is a real, useless headache. Analyzing the enormous distance between the ground and the floating structure, he deduces that the extreme altitude makes it impossible to use even conventional flight spells, which leads him to a completely crazy idea. With his eyes fixed on the sky, the protagonist finally has a brilliant idea to solve this transportation problem. He announces that even without relying on the kingdom's teleportation ritual, they should be able to reach the dungeon in the clouds, leaving his partner completely confused. Without wasting time, the boy squats down and activates his forging ability, enveloping the ground with intense blue rays as he decides to do a little practical test. A small drone appears in the air, and the sorceress questions if it works with magic stones, while the artisan just describes the invention and promises to explain the details later. Straight to the point, the young man points upwards and orders the flying machine to immediately head towards the floating castle. Impressed by the device's obedience, the warrior in red notes with wonder that this technology definitely does not belong to this world. Observing the small machine rise towards the ice island, the hero deduces that it is physically perfectly possible to reach the destination. The drone flies calmly, passing very close to the gigantic crystal structures that form the base of the floating castle. With a focused gaze, the boy follows every movement of the contraption, wanting to find out if there is any kind of magical barrier protecting the perimeter of the place. The machine lands gently on the dungeon stone bridge, confirming to the forger that the route is completely free of invisible obstacles. Flabbergasted by the test's success, Melissa can't believe that they actually have an alternative means of getting up there without using the official ritual. Excited, she deduces that the plan is to build a giant version of that device to carry them, and suggests they return to the city immediately to recruit more members for the team. Cutting off his partner's excitement on the spot, the protagonist shakes his head and coldly decrees that just the two of them are more than enough to clear the place. Not understanding it all, the sorceress questions the need for a full group, receiving the dry answer that they simply don't need other people. Turning his face with an expression of extreme superiority, the newbie guarantees that he could honestly do this job even alone, leaving the woman perplexed by such a level of blind confidence. With his hands on his hips, the young man shatters his companion's theory, warning that he has no intention of building a giant drone, creating even more confusion. He justifies the decision by explaining technically that the larger the device, the worse the fuel efficiency becomes, which would cause the machine to fall long before reaching the top. Curious about this practical obstacle, the sorceress questions what his grand plan would be then to get up to the dungeon. A mysterious smile forms on the artisan's face as he reveals that the solution is to use a completely new and totally different energy source from magic stones. Surprised by the information, the blue-haired girl repeats the phrase about the new energy source, wanting to understand better, and receives only a simple confirmation. The boy's gaze becomes intense and focused as he creates suspense about what exactly this revolutionary energy would be. Pointing directly at his partner's forehead, he states that the energy source will be her, leaving the woman completely speechless. Showing a system panel with the magical elements, the hero explains that the sorceress class masters several attributes, and that he plans to siphon this mana to run the machine, but she confesses she doesn't understand a thing. Tired of theoretical explanations, the protagonist tells her to just watch and activates his divine ability again with an explosion of brilliant particles. A huge straw basket attached to a white fabric materializes on the ground, and the warrior asks what the heck that is, discovering soon after that it's a hot air balloon. Already positioned inside the basket, the inventor summons his ally to get in immediately, as he wants to start the practical flight test. Inside the basket, the mage asks fearfully what she should do to help and receives the instruction to cast winged spells to inflate the structure. Positioning her hands with greenish energy, the girl confirms the order and begins to conjure a continuous gust of wind directly into the balloon. The limp white fabric quickly takes shape, inflating violently with the strong current of magical air generated by the warrior. With the spherical structure perfectly full, the partner questions if that was the right way, while the boy agrees and reveals that the next step is to heat the interior to make it take off. Evaluating the spells, the forger suggests that the Hand of Fire is the best option as it produces the necessary heat while consuming the minimum possible mana, receiving confirmation from his ally. Heeding the command, the glass sorceress concentrates her elemental energy and conjures the flame spell in her right hand. The woman's arm is immediately enveloped in a hot flame, and the boy praises its intensity, telling her to keep the fire exactly like that. The hot air fills the structure, and the basket begins to lift off the ground lightly, taking the warrior completely by surprise. Stuttering in desperation as she sees the ground moving away, the mage asks what is happening, while the artisan calmly explains that the flight occurs due to the difference in thermal density. Pointing to the flames, the hero warns in a dark tone that if the fire goes out before they arrive, the air will cool, and they will fall to their certain doom, angering his partner who complains about the excessive mana cost before the battle. Unconcerned, the young man guarantees that he will take care of all the dungeon's enemies alone, but the woman retorts mockingly, reminding him that he is only at level 24. Despite her initial disbelief in her partner's combat strength, the girl glances out of the corner of her eye and gets lost in her own thoughts. The huge white balloon rises rapidly, tearing through the skies as Melissa mentally admits that after witnessing such an unbelievable invention, she began to have high expectations. With a look full of hope, the warrior supposes that if she is fighting alongside someone as unpredictable as him, the chances of success might be real. In a moment of silent confidence, she concludes that the two of them might actually manage the feat of clearing that dreaded floating castle. After the long journey, the contraption lands safely right in front of the large stone gates of the imposing crystal castle. Jumping out of the basket, the protagonist congratulates his ally on her continuous effort, while she breathes heavily and tries to hide her physical exhaustion, claiming it was nothing. Walking towards the dark entrance of the dungeon, the hero notices the presence of several other groups of adventurers scattered around the place. Observing the men battling further ahead, he deduces that since it is an open dungeon, if another team kills the boss first, they will be kicked out and have to start over from scratch. Aware of the competition rule, the artisan decides that they need to hurry, as he refuses to let any other group get their hands on the coveted Jade Dragon King. Taking the lead in the race, the woman in red proposes to ignore the weak monsters along the way, leaving them for the other groups, while they focus only on the main objective. The healer explains the structure of the place, displaying a holographic map that divides the dungeon into lower, middle, and upper floors. The young man completes the explanation, stating that to advance to the middle floor, they will need to gather 3 crystals given as a reward for the area, leaving his partner shocked that he already knows the secret mechanics. With a smirk, the protagonist uses her own spell against the sorceress and states that he would love to tell how he discovered all this. But the information wouldn't come for free. Recalling the moment she charged for information in the desert, the girl sweats nervously at the mockery and grumbles that he has a lot of nerve to play her own game like that. The duo's swift race through the stone corridors is abruptly interrupted when the Forger plants his foot on the ground, halting their advance. Further ahead, a crowd of adventurers is stuck before a gigantic minotaur armed with a huge hammer, proving that someone reached that floor's boss first. The monstrous beast with dark fur roars fiercely, and the panel identifies it as the Minotaur of the Abyss, marking a dangerous level 45. Analyzing the bottleneck of players, the mage suggests that they simply give up on that floor and look for the crystals in the other areas of the castle to save themselves a headache. With a stubborn posture, the boy rejects the idea on the spot, arguing that the alternative routes would take too long and that he would not give up on that reward, just sitting there. Completely ignoring the group of frightened adventurers, the newbie walks directly towards the colossal creature and informs the team in front that they are blocking the passage. Standing with an intimidating posture, the hero suggests curtly that if the tough guys are afraid to attack, they should just get out of his way. With his pride wounded, one of the warriors from the group turns back, seething with anger, and questions who the heck the intruder thinks he is to speak with such arrogance. However, a second man notices the protagonist's floating status and is shocked, asking what a mere level 24 piece of trash is trying to prove by playing the hero. Laughing at the boy's supposed suicidal insanity, the adventurers ironically make way and say that the monster is all his. Maintaining an expression of pure boredom, the artisan walks straight past the barrier of cowardly warriors and thanks them for their kindness with extreme coldness. Noticing the approach of the small, insolent human, the Minotaur boss lets out a deafening roar and raises its immense hammer, ready to crush the intruder. Desperate with the situation, the glass sorceress screams for her partner to retreat, as her own mana has not yet recovered from the balloon trip. Without taking his eyes off the threat, the Master Forger asks for calm and raises his hand, materializing the valuable red core obtained in the battle against the sandworm in the desert. In a swift and lethal movement, he merges the scarlet crystal, activating his creation ability at maximum power. A shower of digital lights reveals a brutal rocket launcher equipped with the beast's core, displaying on the panel an absurd base attack power of 14,500 points. Paralyzed with shock, the mage reads the weapon's attributes and mutters, haunted, that with the applied bonuses, the destructive damage of that single shot easily surpasses the 30,000 mark. Totally oblivious to the absolute danger ahead, the beast of the abyss charges with blind fury to execute its prey. With the heavy military weapon resting on his shoulder and his sights locked on the monster's face, the young man sentences that the fight is already over. With a dry squeeze of the trigger, the explosive projectile is fired at high speed, making the artisan himself slide back due to the weapon's strong kickback. Instance before the fatal impact, the Minotaur's reddish pupil dilates as it realizes it has gravely underestimated its tiny prey. The missile collides directly with the target, generating a colossal detonation that creates a gigantic column of fire and destruction in the middle of the stone corridor. The violent shockwave generated by the explosion forces the sorceress to close her eyes and cringe to avoid being thrown into the air. Caught completely off guard, the arrogant adventurers are swept back by the brutal gust of wind, screaming in terror as they witness the newbie annihilate an untouchable boss in a single second. The system announces the defeat of the Minotaur of the Abyss boss, and the boy levels up to 25, commenting with satisfaction that it was very good. Shocked by the brutal scene, the adventurers in the background stutter, unable to believe that the feared leader of the floor was taken out with just a single blow. The artisan puts away his weapon and resumes walking calmly while the glass sorceress approaches, nervously praising his strength. With an expression of pure curiosity, the woman in red directly asks what the heck he just did to cause so much damage. Ignoring the question, the protagonist silently reflects that perhaps he didn't even need to have spent the valuable magic stone from the sandworm for that level of enemy. Focused on the main objective, the young man collects the first luminous crystal floating in the air, remembering that now only 2 are missing to complete their mission. Crouching near the monstrous corpse, the warrior warns that she doesn't care about his hurry but guarantees that she will collect the Minotaur's magic stone for herself. Without wasting time, the boy starts running at full speed through the corridors again, declaring that they must proceed to the next target while his partner asks him to wait. During the run, the mage tries to process the absurdity of a level 24 human obliterating a level 45 boss, questioning the supposed uselessness of the artisan class. The duo arrives at a new area of the lower floor called the Path of the Abyss, where several other groups are standing in front of a huge dark pit. Observing the place, the hero explains to his partner that the next two paths only require solving a puzzle, allowing them to collect the items quickly. Worried about the immediate obstacle, the sorceress points out that the floor simply ends there and questions how they intend to advance with the passage completely cut off. Maintaining his usual tranquility, the inventor shakes his head, denying her statement and guaranteeing that the route is not really blocked. A mental projection illustrates the secret of the place, revealing that there is a transparent floor that leads to the other side, requiring only to walk on the correct path. Faced with the explanation, the warrior asks what happens if one missteps, and the boy just stares at her in silence, leaving the consequence implied. On the edge of the abyss, one of the adventurers musters his courage and nervously announces that he will make the group's first attempt to cross. Upon taking the first step, the man's foot passes through the void without finding any kind of invisible support in the air. The unfortunate man falls straight into the depths, impaling himself violently on sharp stone stakes and spraying blood, to the terror of his companions. Observing the brutal demise from afar, the artisan concludes his previous answer by saying that is exactly what happens in case of an error. He details that the standard strategy to solve the trap is to use a long weapon like a staff to feel the empty space and find out where the safe platform is. However, the boy laments that if he adopts this slow method, the surrounding adventurers would copy the route, and it would end in widespread confusion when it's time to get the prize. With an excited smile, the partner has a brilliant idea and suggests that he simply use his ability to forge a bridge that crosses the entire gap at once. Shattering her expectation, the young man retorts that if the problem were that easy, the other groups would have already crossed using conventional flight magic. To prove his point, the protagonist asks her to try casting some simple spell right there, and the woman positions her hands, letting out a cry of concentration. After the initial effort, the mage stands still in total silence, realizing with confusion that absolutely no magical energy responded to her command. The hero clarifies that the use of magic and abilities is severely blocked in that area, even preventing him from using his divine forge. Discouraged, the girl concludes that they are completely trapped. But the boy opens a confident smile, guaranteeing that he has a card up his sleeve. Not understanding what the newbie's secret trick would be, the blue-haired warrior just stares at him with an expression full of doubt. The tense scene of the pit remains, with the other groups hesitating on the edge, while the system reminds them that there are still 2 crystals left for the middle floor. Faced with that invisible challenge, the duo prepares to act and prove that knowledge surpasses any magical restriction of the system. Resuming the explanation, the young man reinforces that although he can't create new items right there, there is a crucial loophole in the castle's rules. Opening a small luminous rift in the air, he reveals that the storage function for already created items continues to work perfectly. Handing a weird piece of equipment to his partner, the inventor warns that he just had to have manufactured the solution before entering, revealing his impeccable preparation. He describes the object as night vision goggles forged from the stone of an evil bat, guaranteeing that it would reveal the hidden path. Impressed by the device's utility, the sorceress praises the brilliant idea but questions at what exact moment he found the time to manufacture that contraption. Adjusting the equipment on his face, the boy mockingly replies that he forged the goggles exactly while she was distracted admiring the landscape from the balloon flight. Frowning, the mage thinks with frustration that not even she knew the deep secrets of that floor, suspecting the newbie's absurd experience. Already with the tactical visor on his eyes, the protagonist scientifically explains that the lenses capture the infrared light of the environment, allowing them to read the temperature of the surfaces. His vision immediately changes to a greenish filter, revealing the thermal plates of solid glass that form the hidden labyrinth in the abyss. Satisfied with the invention's functioning, the hero states that the passage is now completely clear, receiving a sincere compliment from his ally. Without any prior warning, the boy picks up the woman in his arms, lifting her off the ground and ignoring her desperate protests about the sudden contact. Staring into the void, focused on the objective, he justifies the bold move with the simple fact of wanting to save time crossing. In an explosive burst, the forger leaps towards the pit, telling the woman to stop screaming so she doesn't bite her own tongue in the process. Caught by surprise by the sudden movement, the sorceress just closes her eyes tightly and clings to his neck in pure panic. Running at full speed over the invisible floating platforms, the young man asks her to relax, assuring her that he has a full view of the safe route under his feet. On the edge of the precipice, the adventurers are in a complete state of shock, as they witness the surreal scene of a boy running in midair. Squeezed in her savior's arms, the mage tearfully begs him to run slowly, fearing that a single slip would mean the end for both of them. After safely reaching the other side, the boy puts his partner back on solid ground while she indignantly complains about the extreme rush. Entering the new stone corridor, the duo faces a fork, and the sorceress immediately asks which way they should go. Analyzing the two options, the artisan explains that both routes hide a crystal at the end, making the woman suggest they split up to save time. In response to the suggestion, the protagonist just glares at his companion, making her retreat, offended, and ask if he's angry with her. Keeping his cold gaze fixed on her, the boy confesses that his greatest desire was indeed to go alone. But there is a critical problem with that idea. Passing the annoyed mage, he decides they will stay together, dryly justifying that her premature demise would cause a lot of headaches for his plans. Further down the corridor, he completes his reasoning, remembering that he still needs to extract crucial information about the mercenary assassins from her head. The duo reaches the feared path of damnation, facing dozens of sharp pendulums swinging violently over a blood-stained floor. Analyzing the huge cutting blades, the girl in red notes the obvious mortal danger, asking tensely what his brilliant tactic would be for that room. Without any ceremony, the hero materializes his heavy assault rifle and states, with great tranquility, that the solution to that problem is extremely simple. Pulling the trigger without mercy, he fires continuous bursts of lead, destroying the gears and shattering the machinery of the deadly trap to pieces. Seeing the use of the equipment, the warrior excitedly confirms that the restrictions of the previous room are over and that abilities and magic are fully enabled there. Confident with the return of her powers, the sorceress concentrates her elemental energy in her hands, guaranteeing that clearing the rest of the area will be a walk in the park. Advancing side by side through the corridor, the duo clears a path with precise shots and elemental spells while the leader quickens his pace, focused on the final objective. At the end of the destroyed path, they arrive at the Room of Precipices, stopping before a huge stone wall illuminated by a light at the top. Cautious of the castle's history, the woman asks her partner to touch the rocky surface first, suspecting some new hidden fatal trap. Heeding the request, the artisan touches the rough stone, feeling a sticky and disgusting substance instantly fill his entire palm. Making a disgusted face, the mage complains about the greasy texture of the barrier and immediately asks him to use his forge to take them to the top without having to touch it. With a confident smile, the young man praises his ally's quick thinking, noting that she has finally begun to understand the true power of the artisan class. Ready for action, the warrior soon conjures flames in her right hand, demanding that he create the white basket again so they can float to the edge. Cutting off her smoking excitement, the boy explains that summoning the balloon would be a tremendous exaggeration for such a short distance, leaving his partner confused. Concentrating his digital energy, the master forger claps his hands, creating a huge vertical structure of shining metal attached directly to the stone wall. A small, closed steel cabin materializes around them, and the glass sorceress asks, amazed, what the name of that strange new metallic invention is. Reaching for the control panel, the protagonist presses the illuminated button, calmly replying that in his world, the machine goes by the name of an elevator. An electronic beep echoes through the room, confirming the mechanical command of the newly forged contraption, and the gears begin to move. Rising smoothly up the slope, the hero details that the platform's function is precisely the safe, vertical transport of heavy loads, enchanting his ally's curious mind. In a matter of seconds, the silent journey ends, and the metal gate opens, revealing the upper chamber where the luminous prize awaits them, floating on a pedestal. Radiant with joy, the blonde holds the shining crystal, while the system announces the success of the collection, confirming that only one fragment is left to complete the great challenge of the floor. Turning to the boy, the warrior proposes that they proceed to the next room, being immediately interrupted by him asking to wait a second. Before them reveals a huge, greenish, shining lake, marking the entrance to the poisonous swamp room of the lower floor, making the mage let out a sound of surprise. The liquid bubbles intensely as the forger questions the reason for a poisonous swamp inside a castle, warning that the toxin there is so potent that any accidental contact will cause a status problem. As she agrees that the situation is terrible, the glass sorceress soon asks with a curious smile what kind of bizarre creation he intends to forge to solve that obstacle. With a confident expression, the protagonist just lets out a scoffing sound, preparing to act. Through his divine ability, he shouts the forge command as his body is enveloped by intense rays of bluish energy. The light materializes directly on the green water, revealing a simple wooden boat, leaving both adventurers standing there, observing the creation. With an expression of extreme boredom, the girl in red mutters in surprise that it's something completely normal, while the hero maintains his serene posture. After jumping into the small vessel, she wonders if she said that thought out loud, as she was expecting to witness another mysterious and absurd invention like the previous ones. In a pragmatic move, the artisan questions why he would go to extremes when a common boat is more than enough, telling her to get in quickly so they don't waste time. Already settled on the wood, The blue-haired warrior looks around, confused, looking for oars or anything else to move the structure. With a sly smile, the boy states that this is exactly where teamwork comes in, assuring her that he's counting on the engine's help. Not understanding a thing of what her partner is saying, the mage just repeats the word "ungen" with a look of deep doubt. The next moment, the small boat tears through the poisonous waters at high speed, propelled by the gusts of wind fired from the girl's hands at the stern. Annoyed with the situation, she understands that her magic has been transformed into propulsion force and complains that this is putting too much weight on her shoulders alone. Totally relaxed with his hands behind his head, the hero enjoys the peaceful journey, leaving all the heavy transportation work to his companion. After crossing the deadly swamp, they finally reach solid ground, walking towards a small, illuminated pedestal in the center of the scene. The system confirms the collection of the third and final necessary crystal as the boy displays the purplish gem floating between his hands, celebrating that they managed to gather all the pieces. Walking a little behind, the warrior confesses that she thought the mission was impossible at first but admits it was surprisingly easy even for just a duo. Taking credit with extreme naturalness, the protagonist justifies the success by stating with absolute certainty that his artisan class is simply the strongest that exists. Turning his back to his partner, he quickens his pace, calling the girl to follow him towards the next challenge. Staring at the newbie's back with a deep look, the sorceress silently reflects that the artisan profession is definitely not the most powerful factor there. Following the leader's steps through the dark corridors, she concludes in her thoughts that the true anomaly of strength is the boy himself. With an expression of absolute certainty, the mage ponders that although they have known each other for a very short time, she can already state an undeniable fact about that peculiar forger. Visualizing the aura of power emanating from the newbie, she bets that this man named Alan will become an adventurer whose name will be forever engraved in the history of this world. A few minutes later, the duo enters a large circular chamber, marking their arrival at the transfer room of the lower floor. Standing in front of a stone table, the young man explains that by inserting the gems in that location, they will be teleported directly to the middle floors, signaling that the dungeon's climax is approaching. Intrigued by such precision, the blue-haired girl comments that she has been noticing that he never gets lost in the corridors, seeming to know every little secret of that colossal castle. Holding the bluish magic stone with a very serious expression, the hero justifies his absurd knowledge by claiming that he literally bet his own life on all of this. Without adding more details, the protagonist fits the shining crystals into the corresponding spaces on the panel, activating the dungeon's ancient mechanism. Immediately, the system authenticates the delivery of the items, enveloping the duo in a pillar of intense light that teleports them directly to the middle floors. They materialize before an immense, swirling blue portal that serves as the official entrance to the new area of the floating castle. Staring at the magical structure, the artisan comments that this section is an instance dungeon, finding it very strange for a dungeon to literally exist inside another. Comparing the situation to a matryoshka doll, he leaves the warrior totally confused about what that unknown object would be. Resuming his walk, the forger promises that if he remembers, he will make one of those dolls for her as soon as they finish conquering the place, drawing only a question mark from his alley. Standing a few steps from the portal, the hero suggests they enter quickly to finish the job once and for all. Suddenly, the girl asks him to wait a second, making the young man look over his shoulder to understand the reason for the sudden pause. With her hand on her chest and an extremely determined look, the sorceress proposes they have a little competitive match before actually entering the dungeon. Showing some curiosity, the boy turns his face, asking if she is suggesting some kind of dangerous bet. With a sharp smile, the warrior confirms her intention to compete, showing that she is taking the challenge very seriously. Using a visual graph, she explains that the information gathered guarantees that the middle floor is divided into two completely distinct sections. A projected vision displays a horde of bizarre monsters as she details that the first area is filled with a colossal swarm of weak enemies. Receiving agreement from her experienced partner, conjuring a small fireball on her finger, the mage proposes that they compete to see who can take down the most creatures, since the system records the individual kill count. Crossing his arms, the newbie questions the logic of the bet, claiming that those conditions seem blatantly favorable only to her side. The narrator explains that Melissa's chosen sorceress class is a specialization focused entirely on destructive, wide-area attack spells. In contrast, the firearms that our protagonist has forged so far are equipment focused exclusively on taking down single targets with extreme precision. Noticing his hesitation, the blue-haired woman adopts a provocative tone, ironically questioning if the great artisan is afraid of losing badly to her. Pounding her own chest, the warrior warns that her mana is not just for travel fuel and promises to show the true destructive value of a mage on the battlefield. Enveloped in an aura of pure confidence, she internally guarantees that she would never lose to a common adventurer and swears she will force this arrogant newbie to recognize her strength once and for all. Not caring about his ally's wounded pride, the boy calmly accepts the challenge, deducing that this silly competition would end up speeding up the clearing of the floor anyway. With the deal sealed, the sorcerer stipulates that the loser will have to buy a high-level potion for the winner, as they face the large dimensional portal together. Crossing the blue barrier, the duo officially enters the first room of the middle section, facing a colossal army of enemies blocking the path in a gigantic corridor. The dark environment is illuminated only by the glowing red eyes of the hundreds of dark creatures that howl, ready to tear apart any intruder who approaches. Adjusting her combat stance, the mage announces that she's starting the show, demonstrating total control of the frightening situation. Quite calm, the Forger just follows his partner's movement, prepared to put his own ingenious plan into practice. A holographic warning from the system appears, ordering them to defeat 1,500 monsters to overcome the first trial as the enraged horde advances at full speed. Concentrating an absurd amount of dark magic in her hands, the girl in red recites her incantation, ordering the enemies to turn to dust in the night. A storm of swirling purple energy engulfs the adversary's front line, activating the powerful area of effect attack called Black Nebula. Looking over her shoulder with a victorious smile, the warrior boasts of her tremendous clearing power, guaranteeing that this is the real damage expected from an elite sorceress. Acknowledging his partner's show, the young man raises his right hand, activating intense blue rays, and warns that now it's his turn to truly shine. The system details the attributes of the newly forged brutal weaponry, displaying the Gatling gun with a very high attack as the hero announces the artisan's turn. Facing the horde without retreating an inch, the boy tells the creatures to eat lead, displaying a merciless look. The multiple barrels of the heavy weapon begin to spin at high speed, firing a continuous storm of golden flashes that illuminate the dark corridor. The frantic burst of bullets tears through the air, piercing and shattering the flesh of the countless monsters that tried to approach in a true bloodbath. Impact explosions pop in the middle of the enemy crowd, obliterating the adversary ranks without giving the deformed creatures a chance to react. Completely flabbergasted by the carnage, the mage questions what kind of absurd invention that is, noting that the power and rate of fire are on a level far beyond reality. Masterfully handling the machine's recoil, the shooter explains that the Gatling gun sacrifices the user's mobility but compensates by delivering the greatest clearing power among firearms, suggesting she give up while there's still time. Gritting her teeth with pure stubbornness, the blue-haired woman refuses to throw in the towel, guaranteeing that her sorceress pride would never accept losing a mass destruction contest to any other class. Just 2 minutes of shooting later, the corridor is empty, and the holographic scoreboard displays the overwhelming victory of the newbie's 811 kills against his partner's 600, who collapses exhausted on the floor. Devastated by the result, the girl grumbles, unable to believe she managed to lose a bet focused precisely on the main strength of her magical specialty. Passing the defeated woman, the protagonist tries to smooth things over, saying the contest was quite close and asking her not to be so depressed about the final score. Without stopping his walk, the artisan completes his sentence, warning with extreme coldness that the only problem was that she chose him as her opponent in that reckless bet. Raising her head, the glass sorceress repeats the boy's phrase, internally admitting that this newbie is definitely an anomaly outside any logical curve of the world. The duo now finds themselves in a new, gigantic, and silent hall, marking the beginning of the second section of the floor, where the battle against the great boss awaits them. Focused on the mission, the hero points out that if they win here, only the upper floor will be left, where the decisive battle against the crystal dragon will reward them with the long-desired jade orb. With her hands on her hips, the sorceress comments that the dungeon seems very easy by his side, even though it's recommended for the maximum difficulty of that level range. Staring into the dark corridor, the protagonist keeps his gaze focused and alert to any strange movement. Observing the darkness ahead, the boy calmly warns that the enemies have just arrived. From the shadows emerges an immense purple ogre armed with a wooden club, mounted on the back of a ferocious manicore. The holographic system reveals the beast's identities as a crystal ogre and a crystal manicore, both pegged at level 50. Frightened by the bizarre combination, the girl notes the mount while the artisan deduces that the duo uses coordinated attacks and warns that they will need to find a way to separate them. Focused on strategy, the hero immediately invokes his divine ability, activating the bluish energy of the forge in his hands. Wielding a heavy rocket launcher, he declares his intention to blow up both monsters at once with that brutal weaponry. Upon laying eyes on the equipment, the mage recognizes the weapon on the spot, remembering that it was what annihilated the lower floor's boss instantly. By analyzing the status panel without any attached stones, the partner questions if this base version wouldn't be much weaker than the one used previously. In agreement with the observation, the young man admits to have exaggerated the firepower that time and guarantees that the normal attributes are already enough to kill with a direct hit without breaking the weapon after firing. A mental projection details that weapons fused with magic cores disintegrate after use, while normal constructions can be used repeatedly if the user can survive the vulnerability window of reloading. Without giving time for more explanations, the pair of crystal beasts charges furiously against the adventurers, kicking up dust from the stone floor. Faced with the overwhelming onslaught, the sorceress takes a step back, warning about the swift approach of the deadly enemies. With absolute coldness, the Master Forger orders his ally to freeze the hall's floor immediately. Totally surprised by the unusual command, the warrior obeys on the spot and fires her elemental magic directly at the rocky floor. A thick layer of shimmering ice spreads rapidly, creating an extremely slippery surface in the monster's path. With narrowed eyes, the protagonist calculates that the manticore's speed is lower than the werewolf's, but its high evasion capability would make it easily dodge a frontal attack. To nullify this advantage, he focuses on forcing the beast into a situation where evasion is physically impossible in the middle of that frozen track. Upon stepping on the slippery ice, the giant beast leaps high into the air, forcing the mage to shout a warning about the sudden movement. Displaying a confident and calculating smile, the artisan states that the monster's reaction was absolutely perfect for his tactical plan. By analyzing the aerial trajectory, he deduces that the absence of wings prevents the creature from changing direction while it is floating defenselessly. With a firm squeeze of the trigger, the hero fires the heavy explosive missile, sending the beast straight to oblivion. Surprised by the projectile's speed, the ogre's eyes widen as he perceives his imminent doom approaching in the air. In an act of pure survival instinct, the purple creature kicks its own mount's back, jumping away at the last second. Astonished by the scene, the blue-haired woman exclaims that the humanoid used the beast as a trampoline to escape the lethal attack. A colossal explosion engulfs the manticore, turning the beast's body into flames and smoke in the middle of the hall. Staring at the cloud of fire, the young man reflects that this type of evasive acrobatics was something completely impossible to happen in the original mechanics of the virtual reality game. After landing safely, the monster raises its heavy club and prepares a violent counter attack fueled by the fury of its loss. Aware of the threat's swift approach, the shooter glances out of the corner of his eye at the beast falling towards him. Coming straight from above, the purple boss aims a crushing blow exactly at the unprotected newbie's head. Desperate, the partner screams at the top of her lungs, telling him to flee, knowing that her own spells would be too weak to stop that brutal attack. Despite the alarming warning, the protagonist remains motionless in the same spot, without showing the slightest sign of panic or desperation. Through a terrified look, the sorceress analyzes that the artisan's low level combined with the lack of armor will result in an instant end if the club hits the target squarely. In a heroic impulse, the warrior runs towards her partner, calculating that she might be able to survive if she takes the impact in his place, protecting his life. The club, charged with reddish energy, descends, cutting through the air at an absurd speed, ready to crush the pre's bones. Realizing the distance and speed, the girl stops in her tracks, noting with despair that she won't arrive in time to block it with her own body. With a macabre smile, the gigantic crystal beast is absolutely certain that victory is already guaranteed in that quick combat. The shadow of the massive weapon completely covers the silhouette of the lone boy in the middle of the large, dark, instanced chamber. With tears forming in her eyes, the blonde extends her hand in an anguished cry, calling the forger's name in a useless plea. The titanic impact hits the stone ground, generating a deafening shockwave throughout the entire hall and kicking up a lot of dust. Amidst the cloud of debris, the hero displays a slight smile, admitting that the beast's aerial trampoline was indeed an unexpected move in the battle. The luminous panel displays the completion of the reload time exactly when a new missile explodes squarely against the humanoid monster's chest. Satisfied with the immediate destruction, the young man states that this scenario of extreme risk occurred exactly according to his initial planning. A second brutal detonation incinerates the purple creature, sweeping the remains of the crystal ogre away from the main combat zone. Protecting her face from the strong gust of wind, the mage's eyes widen, completely stupefied by the explosive turnaround engineered by her partner. Lowering the heavy military firearm, the shooter lets out a long sigh of relief for getting out of that dangerous ambush unscathed. The holographic system announces his advancement to level 26 as the hero comments that this experience gain is perfectly within his mathematical expectations. Walking slowly, the blue-haired warrior confesses that she was sure the ammunition for that weapon had run out right after the first shot. Without losing his cool, the artisan explains that unlike weapons fused with crystals, the common rocket launcher has an automatic reloading function whenever the magazine runs out of bullets. Faced with his partner's relief, he honestly admits that the situation was risky, because if the reload hadn't finished in time, the ogre's fatal attack would have taken him out on the spot. Bothered by his excessive tranquility, the girl points out his coldness, while he retorts that he only remained so because he had already calculated the exact time of the second shot preventively. Upon collecting the small magic core fallen on the ground, the sorceress mutters, impressed, that this newbie always seems to be one step ahead of any adversity in his path. To put the combat behind them, the protagonist directs his gaze towards the enormous staircase, stating that now all that's left is to take down the legend called the Crystal Dragon, As the partner's companion, the mage silently reflects, remembering all the experienced adventurers she had met in the past, entirely focused on using pure brute force. Compared to those old teams, she concludes that she has never met anyone who exuded such an absolute level of confidence and unshakable composure in the most critical hours. This worrying realization makes the woman understand perfectly the obscure reason that led the mastermind mercenaries to put such a high price on the newbie's head. Before a majestic double door adorned with celestial features, the duo finally reaches the main entrance to the upper floors of the grand floating castle. With clenched fists and renewed energy, the red-clad blonde gets excited, proclaiming out loud that the time for the great decisive battle has finally arrived for them. To break the girl's dramatic excitement, the boy just pushes the wooden door, revealing that it is a simple architectural ornament with no real use, causing great strangeness in his companion. Staring at the empty room illuminated by a bluish magical rift, the hero explains that this floor also uses a portal system, but immediately notices the absence of the transport mechanism. With a grim expression, the artisan logically and quickly deduces that the lack of the shining pillar means that another group of adventurers is already inside the final room, fighting. Worried by the sudden revelation, the partner questions the situation, fearing that the worst possible scenario is happening right under their noses. She deduces that a very strong rival squad has already initiated the confrontation against the legendary beast, receiving a dry confirmation from the protagonist about this fact. With her hand on her face, the glass sorceress panics, realizing that if the adversaries win, the duo will be summarily expelled and forced to restart the entire dungeon from scratch. Totally indifferent to the girl's desperation, the newbie just sits on the stone floor, suggesting they use this waiting time to devise a suitable and effective strategy. Outraged by the word strategy, the warrior reveals that the dragon belongs to the epic class and possesses a lethal instant demise spell that nullifies any conventional battle planning. Caught by surprise by the monster's abnormal category, the shooter's eyes widen, asking if she's kidding with that bizarre classification he didn't know about. The holographic system displays a graph explaining that epic beasts are on a much higher level than normal bosses, possessing colossal attributes and unique characteristics depending on the enemy's nature. In a serious tone, the mage details that the exclusive and terrible characteristics of the Crystal Guardian are exactly the immediate extermination attack and a powerful damage limiting barrier. An animation illustrates the girl's explanation, showing that no matter how strong the weapon used, any destructive value that exceeds the permitted ceiling will be completely blocked by the passive defense system. With this ceiling duly established, the woman concludes that the massive and concentrated fire of the artisan's modern constructions will become practically useless in the final battle. Aware of the challenge's complexity, the young man asks his ally to pay close attention, as he will need her tactical support to deal with the invisible threat of immediate annihilation. The sorceress points out that inside the isolated chamber, infinite hordes of small minions will continue to spawn in successive waves until the gigantic dragon is definitively defeated. Straight to the point, the Master Forger assigns the group's roles, demanding that his partner focus entirely on sweeping the armies of common monsters, while he will assume the exclusive responsibility of taking down the supreme leader. After understanding the situation, the sorceress questions how they will deal with the instant demise attack. Being direct, the protagonist guarantees he will find a way, and tells his partner to take cover behind him when he gives the signal. Before a huge, shining blue portal, the artisan concludes that the previous group's battle is already over, as they themselves were not expelled from the castle. With a dark look, he decrees that the other adventurers were completely annihilated. He then explains that once inside that boss area, escape becomes totally impossible. With sweat running down her face, the blue-haired warrior starts to get very nervous. She realizes the gravity of the tension upon noticing that even skilled veterans were decimated by that lethal spell. Walking calmly through the room, the young man states that everything will be fine. He reinforces that if the two of them follow the strategy to the letter, victory will be guaranteed in the end. With her eyes fixed on her partner's back, the mage decides to put all her faith in him. Glancing out of the corner of his eye, the hero asks her to leave the heavy lifting to him. Standing before the swirling portal, the boy reflects internally, determined. He swears that he can't afford to perish until he becomes the first max-level player in this world. The duo finally passes through the magical barrier. They arrive at the upper floors, marking the dreaded final boss area of the Crystal Castle. Observing the immense circular arena, the warrior mutters, impressed by the architectural grandeur of the place. The surrounding scenery, however, is one of pure chaos and destruction. That luxurious environment is now completely stained with the blood of the former mutilated challengers. Shocked by the macabre sight, the blonde comments on the absurd number of bodies scattered on the cold floor. Unfazed by the carnage, the protagonist warns that they don't have time to feel any kind of fear now. At that exact moment, a dense dark energy begins to form in the air, rapidly descending towards them like a cyclone. With the strong winds blowing their clothes, the artisan alerts his partner that the true legend of the dungeon has just shown up. Descending from the hall's heavens, a gigantic crystal dragon reveals its imposing and extremely threatening form. The legendary beast roars with a deafening force. Immediately, the system panel confirms it is the Crystal Dragon, a feared epic, class boss at level 50. With wide eyes, the glass sorceress trembles before that overwhelming presence. She mutters in disbelief that she is finally face to face with a monster of that brutal category. Maintaining his unshakable posture, the Forger draws his heavy equipment and asks his ally not to be swallowed by the pressure of the enemy's aura. Suddenly, several dark creatures with shining eyes begin to emerge from the shadows around the scene. Focused on the strategy, the hero warns that the colossal beast is not their only problem there. The majestic reptile with shining scales takes flight, circling the arena's pillars, ready to begin the great massacre. With the huge Gatling gun held firmly in his hands, the protagonist reminds his partner that controlling that mob of minions is her total responsibility, receiving confirmation on the spot. Without wasting a single second, the boy pulls the trigger of his destructive invention, firing a dazzling shower of golden bullets into the air. The multiple projectiles hit the dragon's rocky body squarely, causing continuous small explosions and drawing roars of pain from the winged creature. Focused on his aim, the master artisan analyzes the flying beast defense mechanism. He logically deduces that his machine's high rate of fire perfectly nullifies the boss's damage limit barrier. Far away, sweeping away the smaller monsters, the mage is astonished by the overwhelming damage. She can't believe that her lone partner is managing to suppress an epic beast just with a hail of lead. Despite the momentary advantage, the young man displays an extremely analytical expression. He knows perfectly well that this reptile is dangerous, but trusts that exploiting the system's exact weakness will guarantee their victory. Suddenly, the blue-haired warrior interrupts her attack and lets out a sound of pure confusion in the middle of the rush. The thunderous sound of the shots ceases at once as the iron machinery cools down, losing its lethal glow in a critical instant. Staring at the silent barrels of his main weapon, the shooter dryly notes that the contraption's ammunition ran out at the worst possible time. Taking advantage of the gap left by the lack of suppression, the dragon raises its neck and begins to channel a massive amount of shining energy in its throat. Immediately, the protagonist's serene expression transforms into pure shock as he recognizes the legendary beast's characteristic and fatal posture. The young man screams at the top of his lungs, ordering his ally to retreat immediately. He desperately warns that the feared instant annihilation attack is about to be fired. The energy in the monster's maw turns to a dark purple hue, concentrating a gigantic sphere of absolute destruction. The colossal beast spits the deadly spell called Black Death Flame, sweeping the entire arena as the mage screams her partner's name, thinking it's the end. In an impressive reflex, the artisan slams his open hand on the stone floor, activating blue magic rays throughout his body. He takes the front line, invoking the supreme command of his forging class. An immense wall of thick metal sprouts directly from the earth, blocking the purple wave head-on. Cowering in the safety of the steel, the glass sorceress is astonished by the defense built from nothing. Right after protecting themselves from the searing impact, the boy explains that he created a shield with high thermal resistance. He details that the spell loses its lethality if it doesn't touch the targets, revealing the purpose of the loose block in the scene. Crouched behind the temporary protection, the hero coldly plans the next step. He warns that the Gatling gun has finished its automatic reload and promises a heavy counterattack as soon as the enemy flame ceases. However, a sharp crack of yielding metal interrupts the duo's optimistic planning. Terrified, the woman points to the enormous cracks spreading dangerously across the defense plate. Staring at the structural damage, the Master Forger breaks into a cold sweat, realizing the gravity of the situation. He admits to himself that this premature rupture was definitely not in his mathematical calculations. With his eyes narrowed in tension, he tries to process the tactical failure. The newbie concludes that the equipment's durability simply couldn't withstand the continuous thermal pressure of the monstrous breath. Without showing any sign of fatigue, the crystal reptile maintains the dark flow, destroying the steel layer by layer. The thick forged plate finally shatters into thousands of incandescent pieces, leaving the adventurers completely vulnerable in the hall. Faced with the lethal threat, the shooter reasons in milliseconds. Seeking a survival route, he knows that raising another shield will be useless, needing to invent a revolutionary method to survive this chaos. The crushing blast passes through the ruined barrier, drowning the entire stone floor in pure annihilating energy. Punished by the metallic debris, the warrior huddles on the ground, screaming her partner's name in desperation amidst the purple fire. Facing the destructive pillar, the protagonist's face hardens, focused solely on saving his team. Emanating a formidable blue digital aura, the boy vehemently refuses to perish in this forgotten place. In a roar of determination, he summons the luminous particles of his divine ability. The flash quickly condenses between the artisan's hands, materializing a large, red, cylindrical piece of equipment. Watching the new creation emerge, the mage's eyes widen, completely aghast. She stutters, demanding to know what kind of bizarre object that would be at the most critical moment of their lives. The contraption reveals itself as an industrial fire extinguisher fused to a shining bluish magic core. With extreme calm, the boy just pronounces the obvious name of his rescue tool. Directing his gaze to the enemy spell, the inventor justifies his pragmatic logic. He explains that the red container was exactly the first thing his mind associated with the concept of extinguishing flames. To elevate the item's power to an epic level, he inserted the gem obtained from the crystal augur boss into the structure, betting on the combination of technology and dense mana. With the pressurized cylinder in hand, the newbie runs towards the abyss of deadly fire. Despite the logical reasoning, he still harbors a slight doubt as to whether the insane theory will actually work in the practice of this fantasy world. With a wild glint in his eye, the Master Forger places his finger on the metal lever. He asserts that the only way to discover the truth is by betting his own life on his absolute talent for creation. Pointing the nozzle directly at the violent storm, he presses the safety valve's trigger. In a cry of authority, the human demands that the flames of death disappear from his sight. A colossal jet of highly pressurized chemical foam spews from the equipment, colliding head-on with the flying monster's epic magic. Cowering on the ground, the warrior in red watches the elemental confrontation, completely dumbfounded. She notes that the peculiar spray is truly managing to suppress the Guardian's divine level magic. In an undeniable proof of human knowledge's superiority, the white foam nullifies the magical properties of the flame, swallowing the purple flames until nothing but vapor remains. The feared annihilation spell is wiped off the map, leaving only a dense white cloud dispersed by the Great Hall's air currents. The boy follows the overwhelming success of his equipment, shouting at the top of his lungs, relieved to have come out of that fairy insanity alive. The residual chemical torrent mercilessly hits the majestic reptile's scaly face, abruptly interrupting any new attempt at magical attack. Watching the beast get beaten by the foam, the glass sorceress reflects on the madness of the whole situation. She can barely comprehend how a mere metal tube nullified one of the most dangerous spells ever recorded in the guild. Without hiding her surprise, the blonde questions her partner, trying to extract the mysterious secret of that miraculous fire extinguisher. Holding the nozzle of the empty cylinder, the protagonist once again displays his typical ironic and confident smile. He explains didactically that the tool is not a weapon, and was designed purely for the basic task of fighting fire. Unceremoniously abandoning the extinguisher, the young man pulls out the heavy Gatling gun, once again illuminated by blue rays. He declares that the crisis is over for good, officially inaugurating the counter-attack phase. Without giving the beast time to breathe, the shooter unloads a new golden shower of luminous projectiles, tearing apart the crystalline carcass of the aerial target. The penetrating bullets pierce the immense body of the castle's legend, as the holographic display shows the creature's long health bar plummeting towards zero, in a humiliating manner. Realizing the clear advantage, the partner clenches her fists excitedly. Getting to her feet, she happily notes that the bizarre tactic of continuous suppression is tearing through the great boss's passive defenses perfectly. Forming a perfect squad, the Forger isolates the primary target in the center of the arena, making space for the mage to prepare her own devastating long-range conjurations. Focused on finishing the job, the Master Forger orders her to ignore the minions scattered around the edges and fire her best spell in a lethal double attack, receiving the woman's immediate assent. Joining her hands with a massive reddish energy, the sorceress fires her destructive blow, tearing through the air directly towards the majestic beast's wounded chest. Like a true steamroller, the young artisan sinks his finger into the brutal rifle's trigger, extinguishing the opponent's last slivers of life in a blink of an eye bathed in magic lead. The shattered body of the Grand Crystal Dragon disintegrates violently in a colossal explosion of shimmering particles, decreeing the unbelievable triumph of the unusual duo against the Legend of the Skies. The immense carcass of the Crystal Dragon dissolves into thousands of shining particles, marking zero on its health bar after the brutal attack. An blinding explosion of light illuminates the entire scene, confirming through the holographic system that the epic beast has finally been slain. Level up notifications appear in the air, showing that Melissa has risen to 51 while Alan reached 27, and she questions if he wasn't panicking moments before. With his hands in his pockets, the boy walks calmly through the dissipating smoke, stating that it doesn't matter as long as they came out victorious. Bending down on the stone floor, the protagonist collects the shining gem, announcing that he will keep the dragon's magic stone. The sorceress agrees that he can keep that item but nervously asks where the coveted jade dragon's orb would be. Without showing any hurry, the Forger points to a light that begins to materialize in the middle of the fog, revealing a treasure chest. The young man explains that the reward appears automatically after the boss falls and announces that he will check the contents immediately. The wooden lid opens, revealing a dark, reddish gem floating, and the panel confirms it is the expected epic class material. Amazed by the treasure's glow, the blue-haired girl kneels near the chest, unable to believe that just the two of them managed to clear that impossible dungeon. In this moment of celebration, our hero's gaze becomes extremely dark, and he tells his partner to wait. Caught by surprise, the warrior lets out a confused murmur as she feels the cold barrel of a firearm touch the back of her head. Keeping the pistol firmly aimed, the artisan warns that as soon as she takes the item, the dungeon will be considered cleared, and both will be instantly teleported out. Sweating nervously, the woman glances out of the corner of her eye, questioning where he is going with that obvious explanation. Displaying a cold expression, the boy asks if by any chance she forgot the terms of the cooperation agreement they made in the desert. With his finger on the trigger, the protagonist demands that his ally fulfill her promise and reveal who sent that squad of assassins after him. Closing her eyes and sweating nervously, the mage acknowledges that this was the deal and promises to tell everything, asking him to put away that dangerous weapon. Letting out a long sigh, the boy lowers the pistol, accepting her peaceful surrender as the sorceress gets up from the floor. Staring seriously at her partner, the woman in red begins the topic about the mysterious person who ordered the newbie's demise. Placing her hand on her hip, the warrior prepares to reveal the great secret she has kept throughout the entire journey. In a cautious tone, the girl confesses that the truth is she doesn't know the exact name of the person who hired the mercenaries. Immediately, the artisan's face contorts with pure rage, veins popping on his forehead as he realizes he's been played for a fool. In a swift movement, he points the barrel of the gun right between her eyes, and the mage waves her hands desperately, asking for calm. Stuttering with terror, the partner guarantees she has a general idea of which organization is behind it and begs him not to be so hasty, as the information is solid. Pondering the justification, the shooter lets out a heavy breath, accepting the excuse that she at least has a reliable guess. Holstering the invention, the young man says he will listen to the story, and that he will let the slip up pass if the revelation is truly useful for his plans. Straight to the point, he questions what this organization responsible for the attack would be, asking if it happens to be some powerful clan. Maintaining a grim expression, the blue-haired warrior denies the assumption, stating that the enemy is something much bigger than a simple group of adventurers. In a tone full of mystery, Melissa reveals that the client is an institution he knows very well, being the Adventurers Guild itself. Upon hearing that name, the Master Forger's eyes widen slightly in surprise, trying to process the unexpected information. Recalling the meeting with the guild's bigwigs, the protagonist doesn't understand the reason, as the organization's goal is to defeat the Demon King, and he had already promised to help with that task. Walking through the room, the ally explains that there would be no problem with him if he were just a common, newbie adventurer. With a deep look, the sorceress points out that the artisan's great flaw is being someone too strong for the established standards. Racking his memory, the boy analyzes the situation, remembering what he heard before the battle in the rocky desert. The image of the masked assassin appears in the Forger's mind, bringing back the phrase that the people who gave the order hated newbies who broke the power rules of that world. Confirming the suspicion, the mage details that he is much more powerful than anyone at his level, and that if he continues like this, he will end up defeating the Demon King, irritating the people in the guild who don't want that to happen. Staring at the monstrous silhouette of the Dark Lord in his thoughts, the hero questions what the reason would be for someone not to want the demise of that global threat. In a didactic manner, the warrior explains that if the monster perishes, the world will achieve peace, and people will no longer need adventurers, causing the end of the guild itself. Understanding the dirty politics, the young man concludes that the top brass is assassinating talented newbies, just to protect their own luxurious positions, and his partner fully agrees. Adding details, the blue-haired girl points out that not all executives think this way, but rather an extremist group infiltrated, known as the Remnant Faction. With a cold gaze, the shooter asks who the leader of this group is, guaranteeing that the problem will be solved if he simply crushes the head of the snake. Shrugging, the woman warns that the great obstacle is that they have no idea who the members are, and the boy lets out a confused murmur. She justifies the mystery by explaining that the faction has no direct connection to the Army of Darkness, acting only in the shadows to delay the king's defeat without committing obvious sabotage. Furthermore, the sorceress reveals that the conspirators could be anyone, like tavern owners, blacksmiths, and clerics, as all these civilians would profit from the endless war. Scratching his hair in irritation, the protagonist grumbles that this situation will be an endless headache if he has to suspect every merchant he meets. Upon hearing this reasoning, the ally supposes that given the level of the hired squad, the mastermind of the desert ambush is certainly an influential executive of the extremist faction. The hero coldly declares that he doesn't care who the culprit is, warning that he will not forgive any unfortunate soul who tries to hinder his leveling progress. Changing the subject, he asks the sorceress to tell him how the other prodigies hunted by the organization deal with the constant attacks from the guild. Indignant at his lack of perception, the girl takes a step back and shouts that she herself is one of those targeted prospects, making the boy turn his face in embarrassment at his gaffe. Coughing to clear the awkward atmosphere, the warrior regains her composure, deciding to focus on what really matters at the moment. Staring into the void with narrowed eyes, the protagonist listens as his ally brings up the subject of how to defend against future assassination attempts. The scene changes to the outside of the flying castle, where dozens of adventurers are ejected from the dungeon in pillars of blue light, completely disoriented. Looking up at the floating structure, the expelled warriors begin to murmur, questioning if some blessed group managed the feat of taking out the epic boss. A gigantic holographic panel materializes in the sky, drawing the attention of the entire crowd gathered on the stone bridge. The display announces that the dragon was defeated by the team of Alan and Melissa, leaving the public shocked that only 2 people cleared the entire place. Discussing the news, the men comment that the victory makes sense as she is an elite mage, but they are very intrigued about the unknown identity of this Alan, who must also be high level. Walking calmly out of the main portal, the duo considers the mission over, and the boy suggests they return to the city immediately. Worried about the logistics, the blonde remembers that although she can use the kingdom's magic circle, he doesn't have a high enough level to descend from that floating place by normal methods. Quite relaxed, the artisan reassures his partner, guaranteeing that he will forge a parachute for the descent, while she tries to understand what kind of crazy invention that would be. Before the explanation could happen, an excited shout echoes from the crowd, interrupting the conversation by announcing that Melissa has finally left the dungeon. Noticing the duo's presence, the adventurer points to the boy, deducing that the unknown companion could only be the so-called Alan. Quickly, the euphoric crowd surrounds the heroes, congratulating the mage on the incredible achievement of clearing the dungeon with a group of only 2 people. Staring at the commotion, the artisan neutrally comments that his partner is a true celebrity, and she smiles proudly, remembering she is one of the prospects hunted by the guild. Pushing each other, the warriors press the woman in red, begging her to tell them the details of how they managed to clear that infernal castle. Waving her hands to control the public's agitation, the sorceress asks for calm, stating that she was not the truly incredible person on that journey. Pointing her thumb at the newbie beside her, she reveals that the boy is responsible for the success, leaving the crowd in absolute shock upon seeing his level 27 exposed in the air. The chatter starts immediately, with the men doubting how a low-level brat belonging to the useless artisan class even managed to enter a place restricted to level 40. Analyzing the crowd status windows, the Master Forger notes that the vast majority there have very high levels, in the 60s, and forms a mental plan. With all eyes turned to him, the young man decides that this is the perfect stage to promote his war inventions and profit greatly from selling weapons to the veterans. Maintaining her sincerity, the blonde guarantees to the public that the versatility and raw strength of the Forger's constructions are insanely powerful, earning a silent compliment from the boy for the free advertising. However, in the middle of his confident walk, the protagonist's expression freezes, and he suddenly cancels his marketing idea upon realizing a small logical problem. Cutting off his ally's speech, the shooter asks her to stop exaggerating the story, adopting a humble posture that he is just a simple, low-level artisan. Passing straight by the confused sorceress, he announces loud and clear to the audience that the feared crystal dragon was defeated solely and exclusively by the talented Melissa. Boldly maintaining the lie, the boy guarantees that he was only brought along to solve the dungeon's puzzles, admitting that he would have been taken out in the blink of an eye without the protection of the advanced mage. Stuttering, not understanding the drastic change in narrative, the blue-haired woman just calls his name, sweating nervously before the entire deceived crowd. Faced with his partner's confusion, the boy observes her in silence, realizing that the lie has taken everyone by surprise. He mentally concludes that drawing too much attention now would only make his leveling progress much more difficult. The artisan reflects that the situation was perfect for promoting his weapons, but decides to postpone that plan for now. The glass sorceress quickly understands the ploy and deduces that he is passing on all the credit just to avoid attracting the attention of the guild's extremists. The crowd remains euphoric, praising the elite mage's magic and humility with shouts of approval. Quite embarrassed by the exaggerated attention, the woman nervously asks them to stop with all the flattery, with the image of the imposing floating castle in the background. She confesses to herself that in reality, she just accompanied the newbie during the mission. The scene soon changes to the bustling streets of the majestic royal capital under the golden light of dusk. Standing in the middle of the street, the blue-haired girl asks what her partner intends to do from there, and he replies that he will exchange the gems at the guild and head straight to an inn. The shooter plans to use the newly acquired magic stones exclusively to finance his future forging projects. Accepting the farewell, the warrior concludes that their paths separate for today, joking that it must be very hard for him to leave her behind. Paying no attention to the provocation, the hero just agrees dryly and says goodbye, turning his back. Annoyed by the cold response, the blonde grumbles about his lack of sensitivity, calling the boy complicated as she watches him leave. The Master Forger notices the woman's annoyance but concludes that at least he got the information he wanted, even if it was a vague guess. Alone on the street illuminated by the setting sun, the mage crosses her arms, huffing and complaining loudly that this whole situation seems very unfair. The young man justifies his attitude by stating that he doesn't want to owe her anything and promises to investigate the remnants on his own. Agreeing with the idea, the partner advises that having more information is always useful and asks him to leave that part in her hands. In an excited tone, she suggests they hunt together again in the future, guaranteeing that next time, she will be the one to carry him. Faced with the promise, the boy just lets out a low, enigmatic chuckle without confirming anything. The sorceress says goodbye, asking the newbie to be careful, and he returns the wish as they go in opposite directions in the city. During her solitary walk, the woman in red mentally admits that she still can't believe what happened. She reflects in shock on the absurd fact of being completely carried by a mere level 27 artisan. Conjuring a small sphere of fire in her hand, the mage wonders if she will achieve an equal destructive power to his if she manages to fully master her magical class. Suddenly, the girl's serene expression changes to pure alert as she feels a strong murderous intent in the air. Turning her head abruptly, she tries to identify the source of that bloodlust in the middle of the busy street. On top of a nearby roof, a masked assassin suddenly appears, wielding a deadly bow and arrow. The mercenary releases the string, and the sharp projectile cuts through the air at high speed, descending towards the street. With no time to hesitate, the warrior screams the forger's name, desperate to warn him of the imminent danger. The hero hears the call and looks over his shoulder, realizing the ambush on the spot. In an impressive reflex, the boy throws himself to the side, dodging a direct attack from a shining dagger made by a second stealthy enemy. The killer fails miserably at the strike, and is shocked by the prey's absurd agility. Running to the scene of the attack, the partner finds that the mercenaries have already managed to flee far away. The artisan gets up from the ground, brushing off his clothes, and casually comments that ambush was a very close call. Sighing in frustration, the young man confesses that he never imagined the enemies would have the audacity to attack in broad daylight inside the capital. The sorceress concludes that the masterminds are getting desperate, and warns that under these conditions, he won't be able to walk alone through the city for long. To solve the problem, she recalls the offer to teach him how to deal with the assassins, and the boy reluctantly accepts the suggested method. Exuding confidence, the blue-haired woman suggests charging a price to act as his personal bodyguard. The newbie refuses the offer on the spot, claiming it sounds too expensive and that he prefers to deal with the danger alone. Making a disappointed face, the warrior asks him not to do anything crazy and guarantees that he can count on her if anything goes wrong. With an ironic smile, the girl reminds him that, after all, they are now official members of the same group. The master forger observes her in silence, recognizing the weight of those words of partnership. Noticing his fixed gaze, the mage asks if he has a problem with them forming a team, but he quickly denies it. Showing determination, the boy warns that he won't forgive her if he ends up getting taken out by some random assassin, as he now considers her a valid companion. Displaying his typical arrogant smile, the protagonist decrees that he will not perish by any means until he reaches the coveted level 999. The red-clad blonde turns and waves in a friendly manner, saying see you later as the sun sets in the city. Alone on the street, the artisan feels the breeze on his face and reflects on the unexpected turns of his new life. He recalls the days in the virtual reality game where he focused exclusively on leveling up alone, finding it much easier not to carry dead weight. In a mental vision of his combats, he ponders that having battle companions might not be such a terrible idea after all. Shaking his head, the boy mutters that these sentimental thoughts don't suit his practical personality at all. The hero decides to push these ideas out of his mind and focuses on the immediate priority of finding a solution against the hired killers. On the morning of the next day, the protagonist walks through the streets of the capital under a clear and sunny sky. With a serious expression, he thinks that he never imagined he would need to step into a place like that so soon, but circumstances forced him. The young man stops in front of a large, fortified building, looking like a small castle within the city. The building's facade bears the imposing emblem of the clan association, marking the forger's new objective. A memory from the previous day emerges, showing the duo talking right after the victory against the Crystal Dragon about countermeasures against the assassins. At that moment, the glass sorceress revealed that the fastest way to protect himself was by joining a clan. The newbie questioned the suggestion, wanting to understand the purpose of joining one of those groups. The partner began to explain that these organizations are formed by adventurers, but he interrupted her, saying he already knew the basics. What the shooter really wanted to understand was how exactly this affiliation would help to ward off the mercenaries hired by the guild. Using nature as an example, the woman compared the tactic to a herd of animals, explaining that safety lies precisely in moving in large numbers. Concluding her reasoning, the warrior recommended that he join a large-scale, high-level clan, as these factions have connections with influential people. The boy repeats the phrase about people in power with a dark and calculating look. In his mind, the image of the guild's suited leader appears, remembering that the man with glasses had also suggested joining a clan sponsored by him. The sorceress finished her advice by stating that the affiliation would guarantee his physical safety, and at the same time allow him to gather vital information about the enemies. Back in the present, the Master Forger crosses the double doors and enters the crowded lobby of the association. Observing the chaotic movement, the young man wonders how he will find and join exactly the type of organization he is looking for. As he walks, the other adventurers begin to recognize him and whisper in surprise that the newbie is not yet associated with any group. One of the guys comments that he is very famous among adventurers of the general category, spreading the buzz around the place. The artisan's fame runs wild, with people remembering that he recently shattered the absolute record of the wolf mine. Others whisper with wonder that he is the mysterious Forger who cleared the Sky Castle accompanied only by the elite mage the day before. Ignoring the gossip, the protagonist analyzes the hall's structure and realizes that there are separate reception counters for each clan category. The system explains that the classification defines the group's main objective, such as the conquest type, focused entirely on clearing dungeons. There are also specializations in social defense, collection, and subjugation, in addition to the multifaceted type that encompasses all activities without restrictions. With his hands in his pocket, the hero notes that the desks dedicated to the general, conquest, and subjugation categories are by far the most sought after by the public. Despite the crowd, he shrugs, stating that the popularity of the functions is of no importance to his plans, and advances through the hall. Approached in the middle of the hall, the artisan turns his head, surprised by a robust warrior who calls his attention. Maintaining his calm posture, the boy stares at the stranger and directly asks for his identity. The blond man gives a wide smile, surrounded by his group, revealing himself to be the master of the conquest, type clan called Gazelles. Trying to recruit the newbie, the man states that he has heard great rumors about the Forger's talent, praising his raw strength. With a focused look, the shooter listens to the invitation without showing initial interest while analyzing the situation. Suddenly, the conversation is interrupted by an elegant man who tells his rival not to bother the newbie with conquest groups and advises that a general faction is much more advantageous for gaining experience. The new leader introduces himself as the master of the B-rank clan called Tigers and extends a warm invitation for the boy to join them. Furious with the interruption, the first leader shouts and lunges, arguing that there should be a waiting order to speak with the recruit. A real commotion starts around the protagonist, with dozens of adventurers physically fighting for the chance to recruit the young prodigy. Observing the fight, one of the onlookers comments that he is astonished by so much fuss over a level 27 guy, deducing that he must possess a valuable secret. Influenced by the buzz, other group leaders begin to consider the idea of also entering the dispute to recruit the boy at all costs. With shouts from all sides, a third adventurer boasts, offering a spot in an A-rank clan, justifying that the number of members is what matters most in the end. Staring at all that commotion, the hero lets out a sigh, asking everyone to be silent for a brief moment. Turning his gaze back to the crowd, the Master Forger politely thanks them for all the invitations offered. To end the dispute for good, he decrees that he is only interested in joining a defense type faction of A rank or higher, leaving everyone silent and surprised. Confused by the answer, the leaders of the attack groups grumble for being rejected so easily in favor of a defense-focused clan. Confirming the decision with his eyes closed, the young man reflects on the logical reasons that led him to this specific choice. In his mind, he details that defense organizations have direct links with local rulers, making the environment perfect for collecting crucial information. He further projects that by using the excuse of providing defensive support, he can easily distribute his firearms throughout various cities, multiplying his experience gain. As a final point, he concludes that the stability and sponsorship of A-class factions will guarantee the necessary financial support for his heavy forges. Opening his eyes with a dark expression, the protagonist tells the weaker leaders to step away, stating that he will not accept any terms that deviate from the conditions he has just imposed. Annoyed by the blunt rejection, the adventurers retreat in silence, abandoning the idea of trying to convince him. The hall quickly empties around the hero, confirming that the high requirements have scared off almost all interested parties in the place. Observing the rapid exodus, the young man mutters in surprise that the crowd gave up faster than he had imagined and wonders if anyone will be left. A single man in heavy armor slowly approaches with metallic steps, saying that although everyone failed to meet the imposed conditions, he himself meets them all perfectly. Turning his face to the stranger, the artisan calmly stares at him, asking him to introduce himself and state which clan he belongs to. With an affable smile and a respectful pose, the silver-armored warrior reveals that his name is Flynn. Displaying an imposing aura, the man proudly identifies himself as the official master of the Holy Guardian clan. Analyzing the floating information, the newbie's eyes widen in astonishment upon realizing that the man is at an absurd level 378, which is very rare in that world. Approaching, Flynn questions if he is absolutely sure he wants to be part of the team, warning that the defensive discipline is severe and they cannot offer special treatment to anyone. Maintaining a calm demeanor, the glass sorceress had previously advised him to accept the trial period, claiming it would make it easier to leave if he didn't like the environment. and the hero remembers this at that moment. Direct and pragmatic, the boy informs the big guy that he would like to be part of the group, if the initial affiliation is just a trial phase. Summoning the digital contract panel, Flynn readily agrees, stating that compatibility between parties is essential for defensive work to function. A holographic notification appears in the boy's field of vision, confirming the formal invitation and awaiting his acceptance. Pressing the blue button on the screen, the protagonist confirms his official affiliation to the squad with a quick click. With the formality concluded, the two shake hands cordially, sealing the deal, and the leader welcomes the new recruit. Already pointing to the exit, the master proposes that they immediately head to the headquarters to discuss the rules in detail. The guild's headquarters displays a huge and luxurious mansion, proving the financial status of a high-level faction in the capital. In the leader's private office, Flynn stands behind the imposing desk, while the forger waits on his feet, awaiting instructions. Starting the conversation, the big guy questions if the newbie understands exactly the function of his type of clan, and how the organization works in general. Logically, the artisan replies that their main obligation is to patrol cities and towns, being the first line of defense responsible for intercepting troops from the demonic army, and the master agrees. Satisfied with the correct answer, Flynn announces that he will begin the explanation by listing that the squad invariably operates in tactical squads of 3 members each, always balanced by level. The young man shakes his head, interrupting the explanation, and dryly asks if this means he is forbidden from hunting alone. Closing his eyes, the warrior leader confirms that the organization's rules do not allow for solo actions during tactical rounds. Immediately, the protagonist's gaze darkens as he understands that being stuck in a leveled group will be a major delay for his main goal of leveling up quickly. Resuming his focus, Flynn details that for now, the newbie's initial tasks will be restricted only to preventive rounds through the safe streets of the city itself, not authorizing him for defensive missions until his level has evolved. Internally furious, the artisan concludes that with these monotonous patrol rules, he will never gain the necessary experience to raise his levels, besides remaining a target for the disguised terrorists within the capital's walls. Ending the formal explanation, the master asks if there are any remaining questions, and the forger remains in absolute silence, processing all the bad news at once. Reflecting cautiously, the boy ponders that even if he leaves the guild, the problem with the executives would continue, but to profit from the distribution of his war weapons, he needs to focus specifically on those risky missions. Feeling the tension in the air, the blonde man displays a slight smile, questioning if there was something wrong with the established conditions. Sighing exhaustedly, the young man realizes there is no other way out than to force his own rules and try for a better deal. Facing the leader, he states that he has no doubts about the orders received but points out incisively that he has an urgent request to make at the moment. Without beating around the bush, the protagonist declares that he hates rounds and requests to be reassigned to participate in the heavier work on the faction's front line of defense, not for street duty with beginners. Shaking his head in refusal, Flynn apologizes, stating that it is impossible to violate the stipulated methods for any newbie, just because he requested this transfer of position. Maintaining his composure, the shooter confesses to understanding the need for rules, but decides to counterattack, guaranteeing that if he proves his true strength, things should change, and he demands a special exception. The guild leader raises his head, intrigued by the audacity of a low-level player, and questions how exactly he plans to perform such a trial. Assuming a combat stance and calling the veteran to a fight, he opens his hand, stating simplistically that a fair duel should prove who is right, and places his bet. A confident and excited smile forms on the master's face upon hearing that unusual invitation coming from a class so hated for being useless. Returning his focus, Flynn confesses that he finds the newbie's courageous enthusiasm admirable, but lets out a refusal, to the artisan's despair. With his face turned away, the blonde decrees the refusal of the bet on the spot, breaking the tense atmosphere of the environment, leaving the young man frustrated with the cancellation of his strategy. Outraged by the immediate rejection, the forger asks why he refused the combat. The master coldly replies that the proposal has absolutely no advantageous benefit for his side. Adopting a calm tone, Flynn suggests that the recruit dedicate at least a week to the standard rules to try to adapt to the service before demanding changes in his routine in the newly joined organization. Reluctantly, the protagonist yields and accepts the proposal to observe how the team acts, but reminds the master that the affiliation is temporary, so he can leave if something doesn't please him along the way. Frowning, the shooter concludes in his thoughts that stretching the useless discussion would only bring him more headaches, and decides to let it go. Suddenly, knocks are heard on the wooden office door, drawing the attention of both. The giant blonde man smiles at the newbie and announces that the members of his first squad have finally arrived in the room to introduce themselves, and he asks, confused, who these people at the door could be, and receives permission for them to enter. The heavy double door of the office opens slowly, revealing the new allies. With a focused and suspicious look, the hero assesses the silhouettes, believing they would be from the group's elite, who would be monitoring his steps from that moment on. Beside the room's entrance, Flynn introduces the Lancers Noki and Hina, and the two warriors, armed to the teeth, stand proudly on the carpet. In a very lively and loud tone, the red-haired swordsman named Noki greets everyone in the place while displaying his badge with level 55 on his chest. Next, his partner Hina, with a contagious smile, extends her hand in a friendly greeting, revealing her level 40 on the system panel. And the hero stares at the information of his new colleagues with a bored look. With veins popping on his forehead from pure indignation, the protagonist grinds his teeth, noticing the absurd level difference of that team, deducing that he will have to patrol the entire village accompanied by these pathetic beginners in the formed squad. At the room's meeting, Flynn patiently clarified that the tactical balancing in trios leveled everyone based on the lowest member, and that due to this, he had to put the duo on the team to fill the required spots from the base. But the justification fails and the distrust only grows. Immediately, the flashy boy questions the newbie's tactical ability upon realizing that his sloppy appearance doesn't fit the rigid established rules at all, stating loudly and clearly that this skinny guy seems incredibly weak in combat in the main squad. Interrupting his colleague's talk, the girl asks him to wait a bit, calling his attitude totally rude. With a serene smile, Master Flynn explains that despite the low level, the newbie is quite famous in the city streets. Curious about the information, the swordsman questions if the boy really has notable skills even though he is only at level 27. Immediately, it dawns on him, and the veteran is shocked to realize that the artisan class is the worst of all. Thoughtfully, the girl's eyes widen, deducing that this must be the famous Alan. Not understanding anything, her red-haired colleague asks which person she is talking about while the protagonist just watches the scene with a bored face. Very excited, the healer tells that he was the one responsible for clearing the Crystal Sky Castle the day before with Miss Melissa, leaving her partner shocked by the feat of a mere artisan. Maintaining his tranquility, the squad leader closes his eyes and comments that this feat is truly impressive. Our hero asks if the big guy also had no idea who he was, receiving a sheepish laugh as an apology. The blonde warrior justifies that he only peeked in the clan association out of curiosity due to the large crowd gathered, revealing that he was the only one left there after the newbie's absurd demands. Without losing his pose, the young man concludes that the master accepted him anyway because he thought all that fame meant great talent. With her eyes shining with excitement, the girl asks the leader if they can really form a group with someone so amazing. Seething with envy, the swordsman grumbles that the artisan was probably carried by the sorceress, who could clear the place alone. He argues that the woman has always called herself a rising star and must be telling the truth, while the forger just listens to the provocation in silence. To break the tense atmosphere, Flynn suggests that the trio go out for a hunt at that very moment to understand each other's abilities. Quickly, the duo accepts the leader's proposal, showing great excitement for their first joint mission. Approaching, the red-haired boy places his hand on the newbie's shoulder and warns mockingly that this is his only chance to admit that he's weak. Annoyed by the attitude, the protagonist finds it irritating that the veteran picks a fight for no reason and decides to just flatter him to end the matter quickly. Through pure irony, the boy fully agrees, stating that the sorceress dominated the dungeon alone and that he was just a useless parasite on the journey. Displaying an extremely proud smile, the swordsman beats his chest, celebrating that his theory was completely right from the beginning. Patting his companion on the back, the veteran tells the newbie not to worry and to leave all the heavy lifting to him, while the artisan laments the sudden intimacy. After saying goodbye at the mansion's door, the trio finally sets off for their first official hunt through the city streets. Alone in the office, the master smiles, realizing that the young forger is a terrible liar, as someone at level 27 could never even reach the floating castle. With a deep look, the experienced warrior concludes that an adventurer capable of making the impossible a reality is definitely not a mere parasite. The scene changes to a dense, dark forest indicated by the system as the Forest Events, recommended for level 35, and the squad leader asks if the newbie knows the place. Maintaining a neutral expression, the protagonist denies any practical knowledge, internally revealing that he always avoided that area in his old game because the experience reward was real trash. In command of the group, the red-haired man explains that the place is infested with monstrous trees impossible to detect with the naked eye without specific skills. Using logic, the shooter points out that lance warriors don't have tracking magic and suggests forging some visual equipment to facilitate the work. Exuding confidence, the veteran tells the newbie not to underestimate the duo, guaranteeing that those wooden creatures pose no threat. Suddenly, our hero's gaze shifts, and he perceives something dangerous moving stealthily in the forest gloom. Two enormous red eyes glow in the darkness, and the boy calmly tells his colleague to look to his left. From the shadows, a gigantic and frightening monstrous tree charges violently at the group, taking the red-haired warrior completely by surprise. Worried by the sudden attack, the girl desperately asks if her partner is injured. Displaying an excited smile, the veteran confirms that he is in perfect condition, ready for combat. In a quick call to his companion, the duo charges fearlessly against the creature leveled at 35. Faced with the threat, the wooden monster lets out a dark roar, opening its huge serrated maw. With lances held firmly, the two warriors run in sync, cutting through the wind towards the giant target. Through extremely agile spins with their weapons, they prepare a coordinated close-range assault. At an impressive speed, the duo delivers a veritable storm of thrusts, piercing the beast's trunk from all sides. Observing the tactic, our protagonist analyzes the movement, noting that this is exactly how a typical adventurer from that world should fight. Glancing over his shoulder with an arrogant smile, the squad leader tells the newbie to pay close attention to this impeccable teamwork. Without showing any surprise, the Master Forger just gives a lukewarm compliment, irritating his partner, who was expecting a shocked reaction. To cut the distraction, the healer demands that the red-haired man maintain his focus on the battle to finish the job once and for all. Heeding the order, the veteran spins his heavy lance with full force, preparing the definitive blow. Positioned before the colossal beast, the two allies prepare to withstand the enraged monster's retaliation. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist's expression changes as he hears suspicious noises coming from right behind the group. The forest's gloom reveals dozens of red eyes, confirming that an entire horde of cursed trees has silently surrounded them. Oblivious to the rear danger, the red-haired leader encourages the newbie to try to fight, promising cover if the situation gets out of control. With a confident smile, the young man states that this guarantee is very comforting and decides to show a bit of his work. Without wasting time, he immediately invokes his divine ability, concentrating intense rays of blue energy in the palm of his hand. The light condenses into a gigantic and heavy Gatling gun, illuminating the darkness of the scene. Completely stupefied, the veteran duo questions what kind of bizarre object that is, guessing it's a peculiar weapon. With the legion of monsters rapidly approaching, the shooter reflects that he could use a thermal sight to identify the stealthy enemies. Scrapping his own idea, he fixes a merciless gaze and concludes that tracking individual targets doesn't matter if he simply sweeps the entire area at once. With a firm squeeze of the trigger, the Master Forger fires a veritable golden storm, blinding everyone in the middle of the dense woods. The continuous burst of piercing lead tears through the dozens of wooden beasts simultaneously, turning the monsters into pure sawdust. Haunted by the explosive power, the two teammates watch the massacre with their jaws dropped, admitting it's something incredible. A huge trail of destruction cuts through the forest, completely eradicating any and all threats that were hidden in that dark corridor. With his face turned in a friendly smile, the boy casually states that he managed to handle it, and thanks the fake senior. Totally paralyzed by shock and terror, the warrior's eyes widen, realizing that the supposed parasite possesses a firepower far beyond human comprehension. Excited, the girl praises the newbie's raw strength while her red-haired partner stutters, trying to hide his shock, calling the feat a decent job. Suddenly, heavy footsteps crush the dry grass, catching the entire group's attention. The Forger's expression hardens as he hears a dark voice warning that it had finally found him in the darkness. A threatening silhouette stops in the middle of the clearing, staring lithely at our protagonist. The mysterious invader reveals himself with a murderous aura and a sick smile on his face. With wide eyes bordering on madness, the swordsman Lucas greets the artisan, celebrating the unexpected reunion. Faced with the psychopathic expression, the hero displays only a look of pure boredom, without the slightest drop of concern. To break all the tension, the boy asks with the utmost indifference who the heck that guy in front of him is. Seething with hatred at the affront, the thug bellows at the top of his lungs, asking how he dares to forget the great warrior Lucas. In complete silence, the shooter listens to the brute complain about the humiliation suffered in breaking the dungeon record, while his teammates break into a cold sweat from the intimidating presence. Exuding superiority, the villain points to his own digital panel, demanding that the newbie observe his new level of 73. In a quick memory search for the scenes from the Wolf Cave, the young man perfectly recalls that the thug was stuck at level 65. With a wicked smile, the swordsman scoffs, believing he has instilled fear, but the boy retorts dryly that he only looked because he was forced to. With his back to the enemy, the protagonist silently reflects that evolving 8 whole levels in the span of just 1 week is something very unusual. Through a shrewd look, he concludes that such rapid growth in a high-level range completely contradicts the known efficiency standards in this fantasy world. Seething with hatred, the swordsman bellows at the top of his lungs, guaranteeing that all of this was planned exclusively to defeat the Forger. Staring at the situation with pure boredom, the protagonist questions how his rival intends to resolve this, since they are not in an instanced dungeon to compete for clear time. Drawing his sword from its sheath, the thug warns that he won't do anything boring like that and demands a 1-1 duel right there. With a sidelong glance, the boy casually inquires about the whereabouts of the bully's partners. displaying a wicked smile. The villain confesses without the slightest weight on his conscience that he abandoned those useless pieces of trash along the way. Further back, the red-haired squad leader points an indignant finger, stating that challenging someone of a lower level to a duel is playing very dirty. Emanating a frightening aura, the brute tells the audience to shut up immediately, making the healer cringe in terror. The young artisan summons his pistol with a bluish digital light and agrees to the clash, warning that the opponent's disadvantage will be too great in a direct duel. With a mocking smile, the mercenary tells the boy to stop acting tough, as he has already discovered the secret behind that so-called firearm. He reveals he threatened the guys from the wolf mine to get the information that the equipment is lethal against monsters but totally useless against humans. Sticking his tongue out in an extreme gesture of provocation, the thug scoffs, suggesting the newbie forge a sword too, if he wants any chance of victory. Without any ceremony, the shooter points the pistol forward and pulls the trigger, firing a quick shot. The projectile cuts through the air, buzzing dangerously close to the convinced adversary's head. A sharp cry of pain echoes through the forest as blood spurts from the swordsman's torn ear. Holding the still, smoking weapon, the hero apologizes with a cold expression, warning that the bully's intelligence is completely outdated. Thrown to the ground and holding his bloody ear, the thug cries in pain while the protagonist warns him not to worry, as the next shot will go straight through. Sweating bullets, the swordsman groans, trying to stop the bleeding from the graze wound caused by the unlocked weapon. Turning his back, the coward flees, running through the forest and shouting that he will let the boy go unscathed this time, telling him to remember this moment. With a tired sigh, the artisan confesses that he has no confidence he will remember that trash, while the red-haired man is shocked that he scared off a level 73 so easily. With flushed cheeks, the healer watches the scene, completely amazed by the recruit's cool attitude. Resuming his walk, the hero decrees that now all that's left is to defeat the King of the Ents in the DPS area to finish the mission for the area. The girl animatedly comments that she always thought the Forger class was very weak but realized it can be incredibly strong depending on how it's used in combat. The boy agrees that the profession has peculiarities that are difficult to master, but is perfect for him. Changing the subject soon after to ask why she chose to be a lancer. Trembling with jealousy, the squad leader notices the friendly interaction and despairs, thinking the newbie will steal his partner's attention. Butting into the conversation, the red-haired warrior interrupts the blushing girl, asking abruptly if the shooter has a girlfriend or anything of the sort. In an exaggerated leap, the veteran places himself right between the two, shouting for the artisan to wait a second. Telling his companion to watch the surroundings carefully, the red-haired man assumes an authoritarian posture, receiving complaints from her about this sudden attitude. Pointing a finger in the protagonist's face, the leader announces that the two of them will have a strategy meeting right now and ignores the boy's refusal about the necessity of it. Grabbing the newbie's arm, the warrior forcibly drags him away, grumbling for him to just follow, while the lancer is left behind, not understanding anything. Already distant, the healer complains out loud that a tactical meeting should involve the entire squad and not just the two of them isolated in the dark woods. With an extremely serious expression, the red-haired warrior confesses that the story about the strategy was just an excuse for them to talk alone. Without showing the slightest interest, the shooter maintains his neutral expression, awaiting his colleague's big secret. Unexpectedly, the leader throws himself to the ground in a humiliating bow and begs the recruit to keep his hands off his teammate, leaving the boy completely confused. On his knees, the veteran explains that he and the girl are childhood friends, but his feelings go far beyond simple friendship. Blushing and in total desperation, the swordsman bellows that he is completely in love with her and that the newbie's cool attitude is ruining his romantic chances. Faced with that pathetic declaration, the master forger lets out a long, drawn-out sigh of mental exhaustion. The boy declares that he hates wasting time on unnecessary drama, deciding internally that the best solution is to simply help the two of them get together at once to end the nuisance. Asking his colleague to relax, the protagonist assures him he has no interest in romance and offers to give him a hand with the girl, drawing a shocked reaction from the lovelorn man. The hero proposes that they put on a little show during the upcoming boss battle, making his partner question what the exact plan would be. As a first step, the artisan decrees that the warrior will have to face the monstrous beast completely alone. Confused by the tactic, the red-haired man argues that the forger's brutal attack power would take out the creature before he could even land the first blow. To solve this, the newbie reveals that he can apply damage restrictions to his own weapons, promising to feign difficulty in combat, so that the senior can intervene heroically and steal the scene. A threatening image of the King of the Ents illustrates the boy's explanation that the target's weakness is mobility, guaranteeing that focusing on fast, evasive attacks will ensure a solo victory. Crying with emotion, the veteran grabs the recruit in a tight hug, calling him the best friend in the world, while the young man grumbles, asking to be let go immediately. After the quick conspiracy, the duo returns, walking to where the lancer awaits them, and the leader confidently announces that it's time to take down the area's boss. The imposing king of the Ents emerges from the depths of the forest, displaying its 3 red eyes and marking level 35 on the holographic system. Frightened by the wooden monstrosity, the love-struck warrior sweats nervously and stutters about the creature's overwhelming size. Taking the front of the group, the shooter tells the duo to stay back, stating that they don't need any plan for this fight. In a whisper so as not to spoil the show, the protagonist tells his colleague that he's counting on him for the heroic finish. With an affirmative nod, the veteran adopts a serious and focused posture, ready to execute his part of the secret agreement. Through his digital energy, the Master Forger's hand glows with an intense blue hue, activating the command for weapon creation. A tactical assault rifle materializes perfectly in the air, displaying on the panel an attack power drastically reduced to level 5. The boy silently reflects that he has minimized the machine's attributes as much as possible, but since he couldn't zero out the damage, he hopes the low power doesn't accidentally take out the target. The healer comments with surprise on the appearance of another different firearm, noting the Forger's vast arsenal. In an agile run towards the monster, the recruit explains that the rifle has less impact than the Gatling gun but compensates with ease of handling and mobility. In a continuous burst of fire, the hero declares out loud that he will finish the job right there to thicken the act. The golden projectiles collide harmlessly against the giant tree's hard bark, just ricocheting without causing any real scratch. Watching the ineffective attack, the Lancer lets out a sound of doubt, not understanding the sudden drop in her partner's firepower, who had previously decimated a horde. In false desperation, the young artisan shouts that the weapon isn't working and claims to have messed up the settings, fearing an imminent defeat. To take advantage of the perfect cue, the red-haired warrior leaps to the front line, telling the newbie to leave the monster to him while the girl urges caution. With extreme confidence, the swordsman reassures his beloved, asking her to just watch his incredible heroic demonstration in the field. The healer's worried look transforms into deep admiration at her childhood friend's sudden courage. In a great acrobatic leap, the veteran advances through the air, preparing his sharp lance for a devastating impact. A deafening war cry tears from the warrior's throat as he concentrates all his physical strength into the downward blow. The tip of the lance collides violently right in the center of the King of the Ents' trunk, creating a cloud of dust and splinters in the air. Amazed by the impact, the girl praises the squad leader's strength, cheering for him with flushed cheeks. Completely bored, the artisan assesses his colleague's strength and concludes that the battle will take a while but shouldn't be a major problem. Landing on the ground with an arrogant smile, the red-haired man boasts of his accurate attack, acting as if he has already won the challenge. Totally unscathed, the wooden boss rises before the bully, who scoffs at its lack of reaction, asking if the creature is just big and useless. Stealthily, a thick root from the tree creeps along the ground and wraps itself firmly around the inattentive attacker's ankle. At the sudden grip on his leg, the warrior's smile vanishes, giving way to an expression of pure terror and shock. In a brutal pull, the creature flings the group leader into the air upside down, leaving the unfortunate man completely disoriented. Desperate at the turnaround, the Lancer cries out in distress for her friend, cornered in the colossal beast's trap. Faced with the senior's humiliation, the young Forger sighs in disbelief, mentally questioning if that guy is even serious with his slowness. Imposing and furious, the King of the Ents' reddish eyes glow as it prepares a massive and lethal charge against the defenseless warrior hanging upside down. It remains imposing on the ground, while everyone is terrified, and terror is visible on its face. With his gaze fixed on the pathetic scene of his hanging partner, the protagonist confesses to himself that this is very hard to watch. Out of patience to prolong the carried, the Master Forger pulls the trigger and fires a massive burst, creating a huge explosion of fire. The healer's eyes widen in complete amazement at the sudden wave of destruction that illuminates the forest as the warrior plummets to the ground. Fallen to his knees and coughing from the smoke, the red-haired man tries to catch his breath as the creature's green magic stone rolls to the side. Walking calmly to his colleague, the hero asks if he can stand up as the system announces his level up to 28. Totally in shock, the Lancer approaches, stuttering as she asks if the newbie just took out the King of the Ents with a single blow. With her hands clasped on the artisan's arm, the girl demands to know what that was and how he managed to cause such damage in the blink of an eye. Seeing the girl he likes clinging to the recruit, the squad leader grinds his teeth, trembling with pure envy. In an abrupt leap to his feet, the swordsman tells the shooter not to interfere, stating that he had the situation completely under control on his own. With his classic bored face, the young man just agrees and apologizes for the interference. Annoyed by her friend's attitude, the healer scolds him, saying that when someone saves your life, the least you can do is say thank you. The blonde continues calling the red-haired man an idiot and slow, leaving the veteran completely devastated and groaning in frustration. Turning to the protagonist, the girl deeply apologizes for her colleague's enormous lack of manners. In his mind, the boy reflects that his partner is a bit clueless but understands his desire to look cool in front of the girl he loves. To worsen the jealousy, the Lancer once again praises the newbie, saying that even though he had difficulties at first, he managed to take down the monster easily in the end. In an effort to help his partner, the protagonist invents that the kill was only possible because the red man had already cornered the beast. Confused, the girl repeats the word, and the shooter confirms, guaranteeing that he just delivered the final blow, and that the victory belongs entirely to the veteran. Aware of the cue, the swordsman puffs out his chest and boasts that he almost defeated the creature, asking for confirmation from the newbie, who just laments having interfered. Under a fixed gaze on the recruit's calm face, the healer remains thoughtful for a few seconds. Suddenly, she throws herself onto his arm again, praising him for being so strong and humble while the red-haired man panics. With flushed cheeks, the Lancer invites the hero to go out alone and eat something in the city, as she wants to get to know him better. Upon hearing the romantic invitation, the squad leader's spirit simply abandons his body, decreeing his figurative demise. On the way back, the girl walks, clinging to the artisan's arm while he sighs in annoyance that this whole situation has become a huge headache. The scene changes to the interior of the majestic headquarters of the Holy Guardian clan, where the trio presents themselves before the master's desk. Sporting a satisfied smile, the large blonde man asks how the newbie's performance was on the hunt. Completely excited, the red-haired man reports the explosions that took down the boss and reveals that the forger scared off a level 73 swordsman, leaving the leader confused. In a serious posture, the protagonist explains that a guy he had problems with in the wolf mine tried to pick a fight in the forest. Thoughtfully, the master deduces the troublemaker's identity on the spot, citing the name Lucas, and the boy questions if he knows the figure. The armored veteran reveals that the thug has caused problems for guild members in the past, forcing them to investigate his dirty history. As a final piece of advice, Flynn suggests that the young man use the clan's name if he is bothered again to avoid headaches, and the recruit agrees with the idea. In silence, the shooter concludes that this is exactly the great power of intimidation that a high-ranking organization possesses. Happy with the outcome, the large blonde man smiles, saying he is relieved that everyone returned from the mission safely. After praising the group for their good work, the leader dismisses them, and the trio responds in unison, agreeing with the duty fulfilled. Very excited, the healer suggests that the four of them go out to dinner together, and turn the occasion into a welcome party for the newbie. Unfortunately, the master refuses the invitation, justifying that he still has a lot of paperwork to resolve in the office, leaving the girl disappointed. Without losing her spirit, the Lancer decrees that the night outing will then be just between her and the forger, making the red-haired man let out a cry of indignation. Cutting the fun short, the blonde man warns them not to stay out too late, as he already has a job lined up for the group the next day. Surprised by the speed, the hero questions if an emergency has occurred for them to be called so soon. With his face resting in his hands, the experienced warrior explains that an official request has just arrived, addressed directly to that squad. The partner celebrates the news while the leader corrects the information, saying that the request was made specifically for the young artisan. Pointing a finger at himself, the boy is confused, and the girl praises him, amazed that he was requested on his very first day of work. Adopting a serious tone, Flynn warns that it is not a standard defense mission, but rather a very peculiar request, making the boy ask for details. The master tells that the client demanded the distribution of the peculiar forged equipment to the local residents, while the girl proudly comments that the inventions are called firearms. With his gaze turned downwards, the master forger summarizes the order, asking if the mission consists solely of delivering his weaponry. Agreeing with the summary, the leader reveals that the destination of this special trip will be the border town called Beyondall. Astonished by the destination, the healer asks if that place isn't the city on the front line that lives in constant war against the enemy army. In confirmation of the information, the blonde man argues that it is precisely for this reason that the local leader, named Olivia, wants her residents to fight armed with the newbie's forges. Reinforcing the danger, the clan master repeats that it is not a common patrol and leaves the artisan free to refuse the offer if he doesn't feel prepared. Without a second thought, the protagonist accepts the job on the spot, exuding confidence. Mentally, the young man celebrates the blessing of this opportunity, as freely spreading his inventions on the front line will cause his level to skyrocket passively and efficiently. Satisfied with the recruit's courage, the big man announces that he will confirm the request and questions if the acceptance means he is now a full member of the clan. The shooter agrees nonchalantly, confessing that he had even forgotten the detail of being only in a trial period. Suddenly, a click illuminates the boy's mind, and he narrows his eyes, finding it extremely suspicious that a distant leader knows a newbie in a trial phase. Rising from his chair, Flynn orders the trio to depart the next morning with travel costs paid, but the hero suggests going alone, and is immediately reminded of the unbreakable rule of working in trios. Back on the master forger's arm, the Lancer invites him to explore the city together as soon as they finish the job, receiving a look of pure exhaustion. Trying to get rid of the girl, the shooter suggests she take the tourist trip accompanied by the red red-haired man. Against the suggested idea, the girl bellows vehemently that she wants to go only with him, breaking her childhood friend's heart, while the master scolds her for her lack of consideration. Worn out by mental exhaustion, the protagonist sighs and confirms his presence on the next day's mission, ending the matter. The trio turns to leave the room, with the girl excitedly calling the newbie towards the wooden door. In an abrupt stop at the exit, the young man turns his head and asks one last question to the blonde veteran, who listens attentively. Very cautiously, the recruit questions how the so-called client already knew that he had joined that organization, since he was only on a verbal trial day. The big man tries to justify it, stating that she probably checked the association's member registry, which is updated in real time. Against the flawed logic, the boy argues that the trial period is not entered into the official records and asks how a noble from so far away would know of his existence in the guild, suggesting that the master himself be questioned about it. With his face covered in shadows, the faction leader's gaze hardens, and he asks in a threatening tone if there is a problem. Facing the superior coldly, the forger denies the problem and ironically notes the curious fact that information about a mere level 28 beginner travels so fast across the country. Through a sinister laugh, the veteran points out that this curiosity sounds like a serious accusation and challenges the newbie to refuse the job if he is dissatisfied. Behind the closed door, the shooter guarantees that he will carry out the task, while Flynn mutters alone in the office that he will resolve everything perfectly. The evening light bathes the city's castle towers, marking the end of the workday at that turbulent headquarters. In the barracks corridors, the Lancer notices the recruit's heavy expression and asks if something is bothering him, but he brushes it off on the spot. Lost in his own thoughts, the protagonist assesses that being requested so specifically and quickly is a blatant trap. In the darkness of the office, the blonde warrior watches the street from the window as the hero deduces that the master is probably one of the extremists who wish to protect the Demon King. The scene changes radically the next morning, displaying an aerial view of the colossal walled city of Beyondall on the front line of the conflict. A gigantic pillar of magical energy breaks through the sky, teleporting the defensive squad directly to the war zone. As soon as they step onto the luminous circle, the red-haired swordsman celebrates their arrival at the destination, while the healer suggests they enter the village immediately. The master forger accompanies the group in silence, cautiously observing the rustic stone streets of that military fortress in search of hidden threats. Walking through the stone streets, the healer observes the deserted environment and worriedly comments that there is no pedestrian movement and the shops aren't even open. Looking at the walls, the girl notices the dejected posture of the guards and points out that even the soldiers seem to be completely exhausted. With his gaze fixed on the horizon, the master forger assesses the tense atmosphere of the fortress and mentally concludes that the situation of the place does not look good at all. Suddenly, the trio's walk is interrupted by a loud shout from above. A heavily armored guard wielding an axe waves desperately, drawing the adventurers' attention on the street. Pointing behind the squad, the soldier warns of an imminent threat, telling them to look back. Caught by surprise, the red-haired swordsman turns his face, and his expression changes to pure terror upon facing the danger. A colossal green beast creeps stealthily through the shadows, assuming a predatory posture, ready to pounce. The holographic panel flashes, revealing the creature's identity as a giant lizard, marking the feared level 55 of the boss class. Completely terrified, the Lancer takes a few steps back and questions how the heck a boss-class monster managed to reach the center of the walled city. Faced with the massive threat, the guard on the wall raises his axe, sweating nervously, and warns that the situation is terrible as the beast prepares to attack. With a guttural roar, the giant lizard opens its maw and charges fiercely, forcing the warriors to leap away from the crushing impact. Without losing his composure, the protagonist extends his arm, activating his divine ability with an intense glow, and the forge command echoes through the empty street. Wielding the lethal rocket launcher, the boy locks his sights on the monster's face and complains that ambushing someone right after a teleport is extremely rude. With a dry squeeze of the trigger, the shooter fires the explosive projectile, generating a colossal detonation that sweeps the giant reptile in a sea of burning flames. Still on the ground, the red-haired warrior stares at the flames with wide eyes, impressed by his teammates' brutal strength. With flushed cheeks, the healer sighs in relief and stutters, amazed that he defeated the beast so easily. Observing the thick smoke, the guard on the wall asks, dumbfounded, what kind of absurd weaponry managed to obliterate a giant lizard with a single blow. Lowering the smoking barrel of the rocket launcher, the young man sighs tiredly while his partner praises him, stating that this perfect result was already expected from his talent. Suddenly, the victorious atmosphere is broken by the soldier's urgent shout, warning that the battle was not over yet. A new cloud of dust rises in the street, revealing the swift approach of a horde of monstrous eagles at level 40, running on 2 legs. Frowning with evident irritation, the shooter grumbles about the inconvenient arrival of enemy reinforcements at such an inopportune moment. In the midst of the tension, a loud and confident laugh echoes across the battlefield, drawing everyone's attention to the source of the sound. A warrior on horseback appears, galloping at full speed, letting out a war cry as he charges without hesitation against the crowd of winged beasts. In a fluid and brutal movement, the knight spins his heavy halberd, delivering a clean cut that tears the monsters apart, sending goo spraying everywhere. With his face stained by the beast's goo, the newcomer displays a merciless expression, proving his extreme skill in close combat. Reining in his mount near the debris, the man directs his gaze to the protagonist and asks if he would be the forger known as Lord Allen. Calmly confirming his identity, the boy returns the question, wanting to know who the skilled warrior before him is. The long-haired knight proudly introduces himself as Gordo, holding the post of captain of the royal guard of that military fortress. The soldier informs that he came at the command of the sovereign Lady Olivia to escort the group, while the artisan silently notes that the captain's attributes are completely hidden in the system. Maintaining a formal posture, the captain points to the side of the street and politely asks the adventurers to board the luxurious carriage that awaits them. Dazzled by the vehicle, the veteran duo lets out a sound of pure fascination at the elegance of the transport. Walking towards the vehicle, the red-haired man excitedly comments that he has never ridden in something so fancy, while the girl wonders if they aren't receiving a little too much special treatment. With his eyes closed, the royal guard reflects on the exaggerated hospitality for a low-level artisan and soon justifies out loud that the prolonged war has left the city's finances on the brink of collapse. Displaying mental projections of the firearms, the captain reveals Lady Olivia's hope that the boy's modern weaponry will be the key to breaking this cycle of deadly stagnation. Listening to the detailed explanation, the forger agrees with a simple nod, showing he understands the weight of the responsibility placed on his shoulders. Walking towards the carriage, the newbie declares that he will do his best to meet all the local leaders' expectations. Watching the young man walk away, the soldier maintains an enigmatic expression, while the shooter dives into his own dark thoughts. Enveloped by a heavy aura, the hero mentally wonders where exactly the rats of the extremist faction are hiding to set up their next pounce. Far away, the narrative cuts to the luxurious and silent interior of the meeting room at the main headquarters of the Adventurers Guild. Sitting at the head of the table, a suited man meticulously analyzes a secret report detailing the boy's overwhelming victory against the squad of 5 elite assassins in the desert. The document proceeds to inform that the newbie now belongs to the Defense Clan Holy Guardian and is on his way to the distant city of Biandal under constant monitoring. The guild executive named Zainid narrows his eyes with concern, noting that the border fortress is outside the direct reach of the organization's surveillance network. Focused on the mysterious assault rifle, the smug man reflects on the artisan's absurd ability to forge that kind of unknown lethal machinery. Determined to protect the faction's dark secret, the suited man decrees that he needs to eliminate the prodigy before he becomes an insurmountable obstacle to the Demon King's survival. The heavy office door opens, and a cynical voice echoes, apologizing for the delay as the executive looks up to receive the guests. Pleased with their arrival, the suited man greets the newcomer, praising the presence of the artisan considered number 1 in the entire kingdom. With a stylish touch of his hat, the man in the yellow suit and long hair introduces himself, displaying the very high level of 175 of his forging class. Noticing the young woman beside the master artisan, Zainid frowns in confusion and comments that the girl definitely does not look like the legendary blacksmith Benjamin he was expecting. Exuding energy, the girl in the blue bandana introduces herself with a big smile, revealing she is Annette, the blacksmith's daughter, possessing only level 13. With a confident wink, the young woman asks them to entrust the structural analysis to her, guaranteeing that in terms of pure theory and knowledge, she has already surpassed her own father. Sighing in resignation, the executive accepts the replacement, arguing that if the old blacksmith guaranteed her ability, there is no reason to refuse. Inviting the duo to approach the large mahogany table, the suited man decrees the immediate start of the secret work. Sliding the seized assault rifle across the wood, Zainid reveals that this is the mysterious invention they must dismantle and analyze thoroughly. Observing the equipment up close, the man in the yellow suit laughs impressed, admitting that the real weapon has a much more bizarre design than in the recordings. Wielding the rifle awkwardly, the experienced artisan wonders what the correct posture would be to handle that heavy block of metal. The executive instructs that its operation is very similar to that of a common crossbow, just needing to pull the small metal lever to release the shots. Excited by the simple instruction, the master forger points the weapon at a metal mannequin and pulls the trigger, unleashing a violent storm of dazzling shots. The aggressive recoil and deafening noise make the man in yellow let out a nervous laugh, amazed by the machine's absurdly fast rate of fire. Completely shocked by the demonstration, the young blacksmith notes that applying an attack power of 55 at that frantic speed would require the creator to have a stratospheric level. Putting the joking aside, the elite artisan seriously confesses that even with such a high level, he could never forge such a masterpiece. Agreeing with the reasoning, the suited executive reveals in a heavy tone that the Forger's exact level at the time of the weapon's creation was an astonishing 15. The news hits the two specialists like a punch, and their eyes widen in shock, asking if the guild leader was making some kind of bad joke. Closing his eyes, the man with glasses admits that the truth is hard to swallow but reaffirms the fact and justifies that this absurdity is the exact reason for this secret meeting. Imposing his authority, Zaynid orders the prodigy duo to study the structure of that weaponry to exhaustion with the final goal of creating a functional copy. Pressing the demand, the executive guarantees that the success rate of the replica doesn't matter, as long as they unravel and master the internal engineering of the modern object. While the young blacksmith analyzes the metal's weight, the suited man recalls the fundamental rule of the system, where the Forger's level directly determines the base attack power of the created equipment. Following this line of reasoning, the girl in the blue bandana deduces that if the level 175 master recreates the project, the result will be a weapon of mass devastation. A Machiavellian smile forms on the faction leader's face as he confirms that the young woman has hit the brutal mathematics of that dirty plan right on the head. Excited by the possibility of surpassing a mysterious prodigy, the artisan in the yellow suit bursts into laughter, guaranteeing that this job will be extremely fun and profitable. Enveloped by the office's darkness, the extremist with glasses reveals his ambition to raise an invincible military army entirely composed of shooters, equipped with those stolen inventions. With the technological theft guaranteed, the mastermind decrees the newbie's death sentence, stating that he will soon order a new assassination without leaving any loose ends. The scene returns to the imposing and illuminated interior of the border castle, where the squad formally presents itself in the great royal audience hall. Sitting elegantly on the golden throne, the sovereign with an eye patch and horns thanks the trio for their long journey and introduces herself as Olivia, the supreme ruler of the city of Beyondall. Maintaining his serene and unshakable posture, the Master Forger returns the greeting, expressing his immense gratitude for the valuable opportunity to provide his weaponry to the local defense troops. Quite nervous, the Lancer pokes her partner and whispers for him to speak more politely before a high-ranking ruler. With a gentle smile, the blonde sovereign chuckles and says there is no problem at all with the adventurer's lack of formality. With his eyes closed, the Master Forger calls her a very tolerant leader and gets straight to the point, questioning where exactly he should distribute the weaponry. Sitting on the imposing throne, Lady Olivia asks that before the delivery, the boy explain what exactly that tool he calls a firearm is. The noble demands a practical demonstration to confirm the mysterious equipment's functionality and safety, and the young man readily accepts the test. Immediately, the protagonist's body is enveloped by intense blue rays, activating his divine ability right in the middle of the Great Hall. Surprised by the sudden magic, the eye patch, wearing ruler's single eye, widens as she closely follows the formation of the digital energy. The glow ceases, revealing an imposing assault rifle in the newbie's hands, which he formally presents to the local authorities. Behind the leader, the heavily armored guards watch the scene suspiciously, doubting the real effectiveness of that weird piece of metal. In a practical gesture, the shooter points the weapon forward and explains that there are several types of variations, but the handling base is always the same. Without any prior warning, he simply pulls the trigger, firing a loud and dazzling burst that echoes through the throne room. The red-haired swordsman collapses to the ground, screaming in terror as he sees the projectiles buzz dangerously close to his head. Furious with the scare, the veteran bellows, asking the reason for that sudden shot, while the boy apologizes with his classic bored face, claiming to have shot without thinking. Amazed by the bang, the ruler claps her hands, praising the formidable practicality of the equipment that will allow even common civilians to fight effectively. She quickly deduces that the safety lock that nullifies damage against humans makes the project perfect, and the healer takes the opportunity to ask a pertinent question. Curious about the extreme strategy, the young Lancer questions the real reason for forcing inexperienced civilians to actively participate in the war zone. With a serene look, the sovereign asks what the girl means by that doubt, receiving a confused expression in return. The healer naively argues that the presence of regular soldiers and hired defense clans should already be enough force to protect the place. Displaying a heavy expression, Lady Olivia reveals that the real problem is not the absence of military force, but the exorbitant financial cost of keeping these squads active. The leader explains that the demonic army's attacks occur rarely during the month, but the guard needs to be on high alert uninterruptedly, draining limited resources. In a dark tone, she details that the city receives subsidies from the kingdom, but the reality is that the amount doesn't even come close to what's needed, pushing the fortress to bankruptcy. Understanding the mathematical crisis, the Forger concludes that the place hired too much defense and was left completely without money to sustain the war operation. In a tone of pure relief, the ruler states that equipping the residents with the new machinery will dramatically reduce these costs, allowing for the urgent restoration of the local economy. The protagonist processes the word urgent and immediately deduces that the barrier situation is critical and of extreme importance. With flushed cheeks, the squad partner praises the newbie's sharp intelligence for understanding the region's politics so quickly. Seething with jealousy once again, the red-haired swordsman butts into the conversation, telling the girl not to be impressed by such an obvious and basic conclusion. With no patience for his colleagues' childish disputes, the Master Forger cuts the small talk and announces that his ability allows him to create 99 weapons at once. Quite focused, the young man expresses the desire to start mass production as soon as possible, and the noble designates the central square as the main distribution point. Handing the shining rifle into Olivia's hands, the shooter guarantees that he has applied the magical safety lock to prevent the bullets from accidentally harming humans. The ruler thanks him profoundly for the kindness and strategic care, holding the heavy iron weaponry with a smile on her face. With a nod, the leader summons the great captain of the royal guard, entrusting him with the task of escorting the outsiders to the public square. Maintaining a rigid military posture, the long-haired warrior politely asks the trio to follow him towards the exit of the stone castle. Alone in the hall, the noble assesses the invention's holographic status window, identifying the surreal attributes of the special Biandal distribution model. With a fixed gaze on the wooden door, the guard silently reflects on the theoretical impossibility of a mere level 28 artisan forging something so overwhelming. He deduces that regardless of the secret trick used by the forger, the performance of that war equipment is simply an extraordinary phenomenon. Displaying a malicious smile, Lady Olivia murmurs that now it makes total sense for the powerful guild executives to be making such a fuss over that boy. The luminous panel perfectly details that a forge's final power drastically depends on the creator's own base attack power, confirming the shooter's anomaly. The ruler focuses her mind on the boy's absurdly low level, highlighting the shocking detail that he causes that enormous damage without even using magical status accessories. With a sharp intuition and shining eyes, the eye-patch-wearing woman envisions the real possibility that the newbie is the definitive vessel capable of annihilating the Demon King. Through a deadly gaze, the elite captain silently agrees, confirming that the boy's potential hidden under that cloak of normality is more than sufficient. Under the light invading the great hall windows, the leader narrows her eyes, satisfied with her own move, asserting that her decision to call him there was a direct hit. The scene cuts to the wide central square of Biandal, where dozens of desperate residents form lines to receive salvation in the form of iron and powder. Around the large luminous fountain, the mass distribution continues its intense flow, with crates overflowing with weaponry at the entire disposal of the civilian population. Holding a huge and clumsy rocket launcher in his arms, a villager sighs in confusion, finding it very hard to believe that this simple tube is really a combat weapon. Right beside it, the blue panel displays a thundering destructive power in the range of 6,000 points, proving that the old man's initial suspicion is the greatest of all mistakes. Behind the loaded crate, the Master Forger assesses the insane attributes of his masterpieces but silently reflects on whether the residents will actually know how to use this arsenal properly. Hours later, the small squad rests inside a cozy tavern, enjoying the good meal offered after the long and stressful journey of public distribution. Chewing a nice piece of pizza, the hero genuinely praises the food's taste while continuing to activate his divine ability, creating luminous spheres without stopping to chew. The red-haired swordsman grumbles, impressed, noticing his colleague's bizarre ability to concentrate enough energy to manufacture complex equipment in the middle of his own dinner. Holding a heavy mug of drink, the healer takes advantage of the break to question if her teammate really doesn't use any attribute-boosting accessories. Smiling excitedly, the young woman brilliantly suggests that if he combined the magical bonuses of equipment, the destructive damage of his forged weapons would reach an even more catastrophic force. Staring with pure boredom at the translucent screen of his zeroed-out panel, the protagonist shakes his head, fully agreeing with his companion's mathematical logic. In a calm tone, he justifies the lack of equipment by claiming that his current firepower already eliminates any threat without requiring the extra application of those protections until now. Chugging his mug, the red-haired warrior drowns in his own resentment, whining with envy about how comfortable it must be so OP as to ignore basic items. Ignoring his colleague's fake tears, the Lancer approaches, confessing that she understands his lack of offensive need, but introducing a new tactical perspective into the conversation. The girl points to her own body, detailing that her accessories are entirely focused on defensive mechanics that nullify fatalities like poison and elemental damage. Immediately, the newbie's serene expression hardens as he realizes that life in this place had no virtual revival mechanism after a defeat in a dungeon. With a chill down his spine, he internally decrees that he will start paying much more attention to layers of armor if he wants to ensure his own life against unforeseen events. In a violent crash, the tavern's main door bursts open, revealing the panting and desperate figure of a soldier drenched in sweat. At the top of his lungs, the guard alerts everyone present that the powerful army of the Demon King has initiated a lightning attack, completely shattering the peace of that quiet dinner. Without showing the slightest trace of surprise or dread, the Master Forger stands up firmly, sporting a serious and sharp look. Outside the stone walls, the apocalyptic vision reveals a colossal tide of purple and deadly shadows marching mercilessly against the great city gates. The Dark Legion overflows the valley's limits in incalculable numbers, creating a moving and crushing wall of darkness and fury under the twilight sky. On the narrow top of the defense wall, the commissioned soldiers take their positions side by side with the simple civilians armed with modern rifles. In dark clothes and a large witch's hat, an infiltrated spy maliciously questions the pathetic reason for the desperate mix of warriors and unarmed commoners. Further back, the young artisan calmly carries the rocket launcher on his shoulder, instructing the girl that the procedure requires only the raw pressure on the tube's trigger. Thrilled to the core by the lethality of the unprecedented weaponry, the Lancer and the red-haired man let out cries of pure euphoria, unloading their machine guns frantically at the crowd below. Observing the scene, the mysterious woman displays a scornful smile, speculating out loud about which weak and miserable clan those annoying newbies must be members of. With narrowed eyes and a radiant smile, the healer maintains her continuous barrage, proving the brutal effectiveness of the lightning. Fast training received from her teammate, the spy's visual interface tracks the girl's affiliation and displays the emblem of the feared Holy Guardian clan, shattering the mage's sarcastic expectations in a millisecond. Sweating nervously, the informant tries to justify the anomaly, mentally arguing that even super organizations dispatch the base's trash to remote corners to justify the battalion's numbers. However, the witch's scan falls directly on the silent leader of that noisy group, fixing the magical readings on the hidden status of his true class. Terror freezes the woman's blood as she reads on the screen that the protagonist of that extermination is just a lowly artisan stuck at the useless and humiliating level 28. Feeling the weight of the malicious observation on his back, the boy projects an intimidating glance out of the corner of his eye, perfectly capturing the sinister presence that was spying on him from the top of the wall. The final panel pans out, showing the endless sea of abominations, hammering home the dark narrative that this destructive wave represents the dangerous threat of the Demon King's remnant faction. With his gaze fixed on the plane, the protagonist notes that the number of enemies is truly impressive and assesses that their levels must be in the 50s range. In command of the defense, Captain Gordo raises his sword and warns that the remnant army of the Demon King is approaching rapidly. Positioned on top of the stone wall, the civilians hold their newly distributed firearms with determination, ready for the confrontation. Side by side with the residents, mages and archers prepare their magical attacks and elemental arrows, awaiting the commander's order. In a sharp movement with his sword, the heavily armored warrior bellows at the top of his lungs, ordering everyone to open fire on the invading threat. In response to the command, the residents pull the triggers of the heavy rifles and rocket launchers, unloading a golden storm of projectiles. The relentless barrage of magical bullets cuts through the sky, falling like a true meteor shower on the dark troops. With a confident and calculating smile, the Master Forger aims his own armament, taking advantage of the chaos to contribute to the mass destruction. Violent collisions shake the battlefield, generating colossal explosions that light up the night and instantly disintegrate the monsters. Enveloped in the dense smoke, the healer and the red-haired swordsman Kof Non stop as the veteran shouts, amazed by the unbelievable impact of that attack. The system's luminous panel beeps in the middle of the confusion, confirming that the shooter has jumped from level 28 straight to 30 in the blink of an eye. Witnessing the carnage, the captain of the Royal Guard's eyes widen, completely stupefied by the effectiveness of the modern equipment. Through the curtain of dust, the battlefield reveals that more than half of the enemy ranks have been wiped off the map in a single, devastating instant. With an empty weapon in his hands, one of the residents calls the artisan hurriedly, asking if they can shoot again, and the boy asks him to wait a second. The reload command appears on the screen, and the young man announces with a smile that the arsenal is ready, telling the population to give the monsters another lethal dose of lead. Excited by the mass attack, the villagers celebrate the incredible feeling of wiping out the enemies once and for all, guaranteeing that they no longer need to fear the demonic army. Observing the rain of fire, the spy and the bald mercenary are perplexed, muttering that they had never seen such an absurd scene in their entire lives. With cold sweat running down his face, the captain of the guard reflects that he already knew the raw strength of the forged weapons but never imagined that the annihilation power would be so overwhelming in the hands of a crowd. The military reflection is cut short by the urgent warning from one of the shooters, informing that the surviving monsters have escaped the initial impact and are approaching rapidly. At the foot of the wall, dozens of creatures of darkness charge furiously, forcing the defense line to demand new immediate orders. To take control of the chaos, the armored warrior tells the civilians to fall back and leave the rest to the squad, while ordering the archers to prepare for the kill. Under the direct command of the leader, arrows rain down on the remaining enemies in a coordinated and lethal attack. Sitting at the back of the roof, the mercenaries realize they will have no chance to fight, concluding that a forger from a large clan is really not there to mess around. With the last monster destroyed, the commander raises his fist, clenching it tightly for the absolute victory of that fortress. At the top of his lungs, the soldier declares the total annihilation of the threat with no casualties, marking that day as a historic triumph for the frontier. Joy takes over the stone streets, with the residents praising the protagonist as the great hero who ended the war in the blink of an eye. Far from the general euphoria, the newbie maintains his bored expression while his red-haired partner questions the reason for his despondency, whining about having lost the rare chance to level up in the battle. Confused, the healer retorts to her colleague, reminding him that the forger's level jumped to 30, miraculously rising 2 positions at once. With a tired sigh, the shooter explains that given the absurd number of enemies defeated, he should have gained at least 10 levels if it weren't for a limit imposed by the system. The sudden reminder lights up a bulb in the girl's mind, who finally remembers the limiting existence of the beginner's trial. By the world's rules, whenever an adventurer reaches the level 30 mark, they must compulsorily take the official test at the Royal Capital's Guild to unlock their progress. With his eyes fixed on the spoils scattered across the battlefield, the boy laments the waste of experience, aware that he will hardly have another opportunity to sweep an entire army in one go. Drowning in frustration, he reflects that if that colossal attack had happened just a few days later, his passive growth would have been astronomical. As the squad rests from the intense action, the movement of soldiers and leaders remains hectic on top of the defense platform. With a smile of relief on her face, the eyepatch wearing sovereign approaches the trio, applauding the master forger's excellent performance. In a more distant corner, the bald mercenary secretly drools over the woman's striking beauty, being immediately reprimanded by the disguised mage at his side. Positioned in front of the newbie, Lady Olivia confesses that she planned to witness the power of the weapons personally, but was shocked to discover that the massacre ended in a few minutes. The ruler deepens her assessment, pointing out with precision that the weaponry distributed to the residents is structurally different from the rifle she received before. Quite calm, the protagonist justifies that due to the urgency in the enemy numbers, he adapted the inventions for area of effect damage attacks, casually questioning if he made the wrong decision. Promptly, the noble denies any error, praising the brilliant strategy that finally enabled autonomous and massive defense by the inexperienced civilians themselves. In an authoritarian tone filled with triumph, the leader decrees the immediate cancellation of all contracts with the mercenary guilds, keeping active only the partnership with the hero's clan. The devastating news hits the spy duo like a bombshell, and their eyes widen in complete disbelief at the merciless mass dismissal. To sweeten the exclusivity deal, the sovereign announces that the small squad's payment will be tripled, serving as a fair fee for the vital rental of the explosive tools. Totally euphoric, the healer celebrates the financial bonus, praising her colleague for having secured such a valuable contract on his very first day. Desperate with the sudden bankruptcy, the mercenary runs towards the noble, begging her to reconsider the expulsion, as the smaller groups certainly won't survive without that hard-earned money. Without showing the slightest drop of empathy, Lady Olivia stares at him coldly, asking if the visitor's financial problems have anything to do with her village's survival. The ruler's sharp and calculating gaze leaves the opportunists mute and completely without reaction to continue begging. Intending to reinforce her impenetrable position, she argues that the people sacrificed many essential resources to pay those fees for years, and if the external force is no longer necessary, the cut becomes a logical obligation. In support of the sensible decision, the long-haired warrior enters the discussion, remembering how much the fortress blood gold coins to fund squads that generated inflated maintenance costs. Annoyed by the audacity of the dismissed, the veteran throws it in the bald man's face that the enemy army only got so dangerously close to the walls because the hired mercenaries were lazy and useless. Pointing rigidly to the stairs, the swordsman tells the leeches to leave the wall, being immediately supported by the exhausted residents who curse them as tax thieves. With a diplomatic and elegant gesture, the sovereign raises her hand, asking her citizens to reduce the hostility and end the unnecessary discussion. Within her impeccable posture, she guarantees to understand the bad impact of the sudden termination and gently offers to cover all the costs of the teleport back as a modest apology. Consumed by pure hatred for the handout received, the bald mercenary falsely thanks her for the travel offer while grinding his teeth in a silent fit of fury. Faced with the pathetic and humiliating retreat of their rivals, the red-haired man scratches the back of his neck, asking his squadmate if they just stole everyone's monopolized job in the region. Upon hearing the comment, the eyepatch wearing woman turns her head towards the duo, guaranteeing that they need not carry absolutely any moral weight on their conscience because of that outcome. With her gaze focused on the movement in the lower courtyard, the noble points out that although the newbie has ended the mercenary contracts, he managed to return true peace to that blood-soaked land. After contemplating the relieved expressions of the villagers, the ruler states, pointing, that the boy brought the old smiles back to the stone streets and should be immensely proud of his feat. In a warm and optimistic encouragement, the leader asks him to continue spreading this unequaled saving power throughout all the other frontiers of the continent that are still fighting desperately against the remaining monsters. Contagious by the inspiring speech about salvation, the healer and the warrior agree with a vibrant energy, showing they are 100% ready for the next great adventure. Hidden in the corridor near the wall's stairs, the bald mercenary catches the hopeful conversation and is absurdly frightened by the idea of spreading those strange weapons to other strategic regions. In thermal shock from the discovery, the villain deduces that if the boy distributes this destructive machinery throughout the continent, the secret faction will lose its mercenary power and go miserably bankrupt. Without noticing the deadly conspiracy forming behind his own back, the Master Forger holds his weapon relaxed and informs his companions that they need to resume the public distribution as soon as possible. During the calm walk towards the stone stairs, he adds that he wants to finish the tiresome job quickly to travel to the capital and break his level limit in the beginner's test. Full of burning resentment, the mercenary fixes his dark gaze on the newbie's back, blaming the miraculous success of those insane inventions for all the financial misfortune his gang has just suffered. Moved by a cruel murderous instinct, the brute takes a stealthy step out of the shadows, faithfully believing that eliminating the boy will solve the structural problem of the plan at its root. Under the guise of a curious man, he calmly approaches from behind the shooter, striking up a conversation about the strange magical iron tube, just as an excuse to shorten the distance. Immediately, the hero's deep survival instinct sounds a disturbing alarm, forcing him to stop walking and cast a sharp glance over his shoulder. Willing to reveal his true murderous intentions, the extremist opens a sadistic and terrifying smile, flexing his muscles to make the final pounce on the apparently defenseless boy. In a swift and explosive advance, the criminal launches the full corpulent weight of his charge directly against the protagonist's back, causing a cowardly impact. With no time to adjust his posture or plant his feet, the shooter is violently thrown beyond the edge, cruelly pushed off the safe limits of the Great Wall. Caught completely by surprise by the cowardly attack, the red-haired swordsman's eyes widen, stupefied by the absurdity of seeing his group mate flying defenselessly towards the frightening void. The same petrified expression of terror takes over the beautiful face of the ruler, who watches the tragic scene from the sidelines without any chance of casting a saving spell in time.